All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Ethan Collier, and I'll be chairing today's meeting at the Chattanooga-Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission. A couple things before we get started. Planning Commission's received this packet in the mail a little over a week ago, and they've had the opportunity to review it in advance of today's meeting. And so at times during the meeting, we do move fairly quickly through all of this information. So follow along. If you have a copy of the agenda in front of you, make sure to follow it closely so that you can track with us as we're moving through it. Sometimes it happens quick. In each case, as it comes up on the agenda, I'll read off the case number, and typically I'll read off the address. And I will ask if you're here in opposition to the case. Some people may not necessarily consider themselves to be in opposition, but they have some questions or they have some concerns. At that time, when I ask if you're here in opposition, make sure to raise your hand so that I can see you, because if we don't have opposition and we have a staff recommendation to approve, oftentimes we'll take action on the case without having heard from anybody. And we want to make sure that since you're here, you've had the opportunity to speak. If we have opposition to a case or we have staff recommendation to deny, most of the time I'll ask staff to give the presentation, which is what's included in our packet. After the staff gets done with the presentation, the applicant will have 7 minutes to present their case. After the applicant's finished, opposition will have a total of 9 minutes. We stick to the 9 minutes. We're super strict about sticking to the 9 minutes. And so sometimes there's maybe 7 or 8 people that want to speak during that 9 minutes. I would just ask that you keep your comments brief, keep them to the point, and don't repeat things that you've already heard said. So if somebody gets up and says that there are certain concerns in regards to traffic or parking or what have you, when you have the opportunity to speak, make sure you don't repeat everything that we've already heard. Planning Commission's here to listen, but it's not necessarily helpful to hear the same thing over and over again and use up that total 9 minutes. When you do come up to the mic, whether you're an applicant or you're here in opposition, make sure to state your name and address for the record. After the opposition is finished, they'll all have a seat, and the applicant will have an opportunity. They'll have 2 minutes to respond to any of the comments that they've heard from opposition. All the conversation that takes place here today will be between the Planning Commission members and the person at the microphone. I only say that because sometimes people get confused and they think that they're addressing staff or they think that they're addressing you guys. That's not the case. The person at the microphone is talking to us. We're talking to the person at the microphone. It's only a two-way conversation. Everybody else is here to listen. So with that, we can jump into the agenda. Mr. Schultz, did I miss anything?
No, you did not. But there are 3 cases that have been officially withdrawn. They're showing up on the agenda. Do you want me to read those off?
Yes, please.
Under old business, item number 1, which is case 2023-0058. This is for 320 West Hills Drive. This has officially been withdrawn by the applicant and will not be acted on today by Planning Commission. Next case withdrawn under old business is number 6, which is case 2023-135 for Stephen and Brooke Christensen, 6900 block of Ramsey Town Road. That was a special permit. That has been withdrawn by the applicant. Then under new business, item number 12, a mandatory referral, 2023-152, Petra Morozeski, 800 block of Dodds Avenue. That's a mandatory referral. That has been withdrawn by the applicant.
What that means is we're not going to hear those today. So if you're here and you were at all interested in those cases, just know that we're not going to hear them today. And the applicant has, by withdrawing, what Mr. Schultz means is it's finished. It's done. They've actually pulled their application back. So, all right, we'll jump into the agenda. The first item under subdivision plats and variances is SD 2023-0036. And this is preliminary plat for retreats at White Oak Phase 2. And staff is recommended to defer from the August 23rd meeting, and staff's recommending to defer again.
Yes, there's issues with this subdivision in terms of getting a secondary access point. Has roughly 215 lots. At lot 200, you have to have a secondary access point. They're working through those. I think they're very close to getting that secondary access point. So they wish to defer again for 30 days. At the October Plan Commission, if we don't recommend to approve, it will have to be recommended for denial. Those 60 days is the window. But the applicant's aware of the deferral, and I think they understand that.
Okay. Is there any opposition present? You're here in opposition? Okay. Did you hear what was just said? Do you feel the need to speak? Were you here last month? Did you speak on the case last month? Oh, okay. If you'd like to speak, come on up.
It's Kim Helton, 8618 Snow Hill Road. And first of all, this PUD, the original PUD that was approved, this plan differs from it quite a bit. It's not the same as the original PUD. There was a street that came off on one side, and where there were some homes, there's now a retention pond or detention pond. So this does not line up with the original PUD that was approved for this piece of property. Also, you know, they're working on the secondary access point. The subdivision regulations do require it for 200 more homes. The International Fire Code Appendix D was adopted by Hamilton County. It was changed from 2 entrances for 30 homes to 2 entrances for over 200 homes, which is quite a large amount to change it. It's almost 7 times what the International Fire Code has in the Appendix D. So to go anything over 200 and not have that second entrance with that piece of property listed on the Hamilton County GIS as forestry, that's a dangerous thing to not have a second entrance when you have all that forest land that could burn if something were to happen to block that first entrance, the only entrance. So those are some of the concerns that we wanted to bring. And then just to point out that the PUD does not match the original PUD. It's changed quite a bit. It's increased in density, this section has. Some of the single family homes have changed to retention pond. All those things supposedly are supposed to call for a major PUD amendment. So it was a major change to require a PUD amendment. So that's something that we wanted to point out as well. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Schultz, do you have any comments on the PUD comments?
There were 2 PUDs. One was in 2006 that did show a secondary entrance coming around I-75. I think in 2007 or 2009, I don't have my dates in front of me, there was another revised PUD that was approved that showed that secondary entrance going away. It did show more townhomes along I-75. Those went to single family. As far as there are some major and minor changes that staff can approve. I don't remember seeing those being what would be considered major changes. We'd have to look at that again. Again, the secondary interest is why this is being deferred at this point.
Okay, thank you. What's the will of the commission? Move to defer 30 days. We have a motion to defer and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Chairman, I recuse. Thank you. Mr. Steele. Bird, rather. I don't know why I always make that mistake. On our agenda, case 2, SD 2023-0038. It's final plat for McKenzie Farm, phase 2. Has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is SD 2023-0040. This is Windhaven PUD lots 1 through 64 located at 8913 Roy Lane. Staff is recommended to defer for 30 days. Is there any opposition present? Okay. Is the applicant present? Mr. Schultz.
I don't want to speak for opposition, but I think later on the agenda, there's two applications for a lifting and condition and a special permit for the PUD. That may be what she wants to speak to.
Okay, if you'd like to speak, come on up. The applicant, can I, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Well, I need to hear from the applicant. Where's the applicant? Are you okay with deferring? Okay, all right. Ma'am,
Okay, so this plat we feel should be denied, not deferred, because the county commission will not be able to act on the other two cases before the next planning commission meeting. So it would just have to be deferred again another 30 days. This plat does not meet some of the plans and subdivision and zoning regulations. And the public notice for this plat was River's Edge, and it's now called Windhaven. But some of the issues with the plat, it lists resolution 822-53, which is a PUD that's 15.49 acres with a density of 4 per acre. This acreage has changed and the density has changed. So the plat is not in line with the resolution listed. The plat says no permits for community lots, yet nothing on the plat is labeled as a community lot and no lot numbers are provided. There is either a pond or sinkhole that is not shown on this plat, and the density is not listed on the plat. The subdivision regulations 300.4 say approval of a preliminary plat shall become effective when the planning commission votes to approve. And of course, your vote would be to defer, but this plat does not meet the regulations, so it should not be approved. Section 101.1 of the subdivision regulations say the subdivision of land and the subsequent development of the subdivided plat as subject to the control of Hamilton County pursuant to the comprehensive plan of Hamilton County. Section 101.3 says the existing and proposed public improvements shall conform and be properly related to the proposals shown in the comprehensive plan. And it is intended that these regulations shall supplement and facilitate the enforcement of the provisions and standards contained in the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan. Comprehensive Plan 2030 and the Wolf-Latifer Plan were adopted by the county commission, are supposed to be used together. They were the last plans adopted for this area. The Tennessee Code says decisions must be consistent. Both plans show the property in the transitional development sector, and both show that the open space model is supposed to be used, which requires 30 to 80% in open space. So at a minimum, this should have 30% open space. The Wolf-Latifer plan says this area should be 3 per acre, and any increase in density should only be considered if the development will preserve substantial areas of usable open space. So more than 30% of open space should be required. Zoning regulation 401.A says on-site usable recreation and open space shall be provided. Such area shall be set aside for open space or recreation purposes only. It is intended to serve the residents of the PUD and should be easily accessible to them. The open spaces consist of a rain garden and some landscape buffers. There's another area of the open space that is not supposed to be counted in that calculation, because section 401.4C of the zoning regulations say open space shall be exclusive of detention ponds, retention ponds, flood control channel rights of way. This property has some property below the 690 contour line. That is a flood control easement from TVA. So according to zoning regulations, it can't control that flood control channel. So anything below the 690 line cannot be counted. And that is being counted in this development, in this open space area. The subdivision regulations say a copy of the hydrology report should be submitted in section 500.10. The hydrology report that was submitted, that we received, did not show a stream with several culverts, the pond or sinkhole that's close to Savannah Bay on this property. And there are national wetlands on either the border of or right next to this property. It's on Savannah Bay. Many of the wetlands go past where it shows the national wetlands on the national wetland map. They go past the forested area as well on many properties on Savannah Bay. There's not any sampling points to test for, wetlands or any information at all in the hydrology report about wetland areas. There's nothing at all where it shows that they've explored it or done any samples for it. And so we're asking that be explored, because that's, it's important to protect our wetlands. In section 406.1, it says, in that part of unincorporated Hamilton County, in which the Hamilton County Water Program rules and regulations, subdivisions must comply with those. He shows grass filters and swales. In the subdivision next to this, the adjacent subdivision, they have grass swales, but they are not functioning properly because the water table is at ground level at least 6 months out of the year, they say. So the grass swales right next to this are probably going to have the same issues. The rain garden, the information in the BMP manual for the Hamilton County Water Quality Department says that any site where subsoil provides reasonable infiltration in the water table is sufficiently lower than the design depth of the basin. The soil in this area is classified as CAB, which is 18 to 36 inches below the surface is the water table. So this rain garden may not function properly because it might not have the clearance that it needs to have the 2 feet above the water table. They're typically used in smaller areas, it says, and the maximum contributing drainage to a rain garden should be 5 acres. This property is 12.38 acres. And let's see, it also says it should not be used where there's continuous flow of the groundwater, sump pumps, or other sources, which would also be the swales next to it that are not draining properly. So we feel, based on all of this, that this subdivision does not meet the subdivision regulations, the zoning regulations, the plans, and the Hamilton County Water Quality Department BMP manual. So we feel like it should be denied and not delayed because there's many things that need to be corrected and many things that need to be included on this plat that aren't there. So we don't think that it should be deferred 30 days. It'll have to be deferred again another 30 days, and it's still going to be incorrect if it stays the way it is. So we feel like it should be denied and not delayed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
Ms. Helton, I have a question. Several times you said we oppose and we feel. Is there an organization that's specifically opposing this?
The subdivision next to it, there are several people in there that could not make it today. For the other 2 cases, I have an email to read from them for those 2 cases. But they asked me to present this for the subdivision. But yes, there are several people that are opposed. I'm mostly here on their behalf.
Okay.
So, because they couldn't make it and they asked me to do that for them. So,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me ask.
Mr. Lehman.
If you don't mind. So, and I know there's the case 154 and 155, which is amending some conditions. So this plat can't be approved unless those conditions are amended. And I think to Ms. Helton's point,
Correct.
That only comes from a recommendation. No matter what, depends on what we do later on. It's still a recommendation that'll go to county commission to
Correct.
lift those amendments. So
Correct. And
I'm
once-
not
once-
saying to deny or defer, but I mean, I think to the point, this plat can't be approved. It does not meet
No.
the current zoning unless that's changed.
But state law, when we get a plat, we have to put it on the agenda in 30 days. We can't just all of a sudden
Okay.
not put it on the agenda. That's why we have a deferral for 30 days. If you defer it for 60 days, that's acceptable. Can't go beyond that because more than 60 days is deemed approved if you don't take action. That's why we normally do 30 days at a time.
Just to continue
Continue
to
that discussion.
keep it on the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And there was a comment, there is some community lots. They're just like the 2 lots when you first enter into the subdivision as well as the back of the cul-de-sac. A lot of the things related to stormwater or water quality, that's reviewed after the plat is submitted. That goes through the water quality review. So a lot of things will happen, just not this point in the game.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. What's the will of the commission? We have a motion to defer for 30 days and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda, item 4 is SD 2023-0041, and it's James Creek PUD Phase 2. And staff is recommended to approve. Is there any opposition present? Ma'am, do you wish to speak? Okay. Okay. Okay.
Which case is?
0039.
The subdivision case? That Beverly Lane, that is for next month. It was deferred until next month. It's not on the agenda. The applicant requested it be deferred until next month. No, it was deferred for next month. For the variance, yes.
All right. Ma'am, did you wish to speak on this case?
So when the James Creek PUD was approved, it did meet some of the qualifications of the White Oak Mountain Plan, but did not meet the qualifications of the Wolf Timber Plan, which is the last legally adopted plan for this area. And they wanted me to be sure to state that it does not meet the Wolf Timber Plan. Also, the 2 left turn lanes that are supposed to be implemented for this subdivision have not been, and the shoulder improvements have not been made. And the first left turn lane in the first phase is directly opposite of Bellow Ridge. And there's a left turn lane, a short left turn lane that will be going into the James Creek development, which is going to make it extremely difficult for the people in Bellow Ridge to get out of their subdivision. So apparently this design was approved. I guess the Hamilton County Engineer's Office or the road department, but this is a concern to people in that neighborhood because it's going to cause them a lot of issues in getting out of their neighborhood because not only is there just the normal 2 lanes that were there previously, but then there's a left turn lane and that entrance is right across from their subdivision entrance. So they're going to have a very hard time getting out of their subdivision. There's also some homes on Ottawa Georgetown Road. They're going to have to go across that left turn lane just to get out. So they're going to have to cross the left turn lane and cross over into onto Ottawa Georgetown Road. So this design is not really safe for the community that's there and existing now. So the designs of these 2 left turn lanes are not safe for the people that live there right now. So that's some concern that they wanted me to pass on. Thank you.
Ma'am, I just need to ask, are you a traffic engineer or a PE or anything like that?
No, I'm not. It's
Okay.
just the concerns that they have
Okay.
because they can see that entrance
All right.
is
Do you
right
have any
across.
specific qualifications regarding the safety of those intersections?
Only what the people in the neighborhood are concerned about is the
Okay.
one thing that I know.
Yeah.
That's all. I'm bringing their concerns here because, it's a safety concern from them trying to.
Right.
get out.
I'm only clarifying because, with the way we take plats, they're approved. The Planning Commission has to approve plats that meet the regulations. And those regulations are reviewed by professionals who do have certifications to determine whether or not they're safe. And if those employees of our county review the plats and say that it's meeting the regulations, then this body has to approve those plats.
Okay.
Unless somebody comes with certain qualifications and says that those regulations have been not followed, or something like that. So,
Well, the one thing that we noticed is that those left turn lanes are not shown on this plat. It shows sight distance instead of the left turn lanes actually being shown on Ottawa Georgetown Road or within that plat area. So those road improvements aren't shown on the plat at all. So, if that gets approved, I thought that when the final plat was approved, I believe the Tennessee code says if it's not implemented before the final plat is either approved or signed, then they have to have a bond. Is that going to take place for this, a bond of surety to complete those improvements? And the fact that it's not shown on the plat or anywhere, the Ottawa Georgetown Road, the road improvements are not, you can't see them on there, on that plat. So, should they be on that plat? Should they be shown on that plat? Because they're not being shown.
Mr. Lehman can speak to that.
And Mr. Schultz can probably, road improvements aren't shown on the plat. plats are for property subdivision. And so this is part of the design requirements for that subdivision. And so this is the design plan. And so what happens is after preliminary plat, the engineer developer will go get permits relative to these improvements, and these improvements will be implemented. And you're correct, subdivision regulations do allow either them to be bonded, to be implemented prior to final plat, or there is a stipulation that you can bond to finish, but you can't bond to start. So that's all part of the process once preliminary plat's approved.
Is that something that has to be subjected, I mean, put into this before it's approved, that it has to be bonded? In
No.
order
No.
to
It's
be,
part of the subdivision.
This plat will not be signed until those road improvements are put into place. Even though it's getting approval by the planning commission, it cannot be signed and recorded to all infrastructure improvements have been installed and officially accepted by the county departments.
okay, so we just have to keep up as to whether or not this happens, because this happened with Snow Hill Road that I spoke about last month. These left turn lanes did not get implemented, but this was in the resolution as a requirement for the turn lanes to be in place for this development. So that was part of the resolution when it was approved.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
In regards to item 4 on our agenda, case, we have a motion to approve and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on our agenda, item 4 is SD 2023-0042A. And this is located at Hiptown lots 1 through 9 and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case, SD 2023-0042B is lots 1 through 9 in Hiptown. It's also got a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
Second.
We have a motion to approve and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is SD 2023-0043. This is Black Creek Mountain, The Pass, Phase 14. And has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
Second.
We have a motion to approve and it has been seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, there is a condition in this plat, staff recommendation. I think the applicant wishes to amend. The condition is add a condition that the retaining wall will require a public-private partnership for CEI services if the wall was in the right-of-way. I think they want to tweak that condition.
Yes,
Hi,
ma'am.
Caitlin Sims, Lavella Associates. We would just like to, after discussions with CDOT, to amend this condition to say that the retaining wall will require CEI services if the wall is within the right of way. So it will not require the PPP, just the CEI services.
What does CEI stand for?
Construction, engineering, and inspection.
I don't understand. What does that mean?
I'll defer to Chris Davis here. That's unusual for us, and that the retaining wall is in the right of way. He can probably speak better than I can to that condition.
Yes, it's in the city code. It just requires the inspection services to be their own site to do materials testing and make sure everything is done according to the approved plans. And the change is that we had required them to do a public-private partnership so that the developer would pay for CEI services that the city would arrange. But they came back to us and said that they would prefer to just contract with someone directly. And the city code allows them to just pick someone from the TDOT pre-qualified list, and we find that acceptable.
Why are we making that condition a part of the final plat and not some sort of permit? Do you know? It seems odd to me that that's a condition of the final plat and not
I'll
a
defer
permit.
Chris. I think that came from that CDOT's comment, so.
Yeah, seems to go against what we just talked about.
Yeah. I mean, the opposition would have liked to have had the last plat approved with 4 or 5 conditions on a final plat.
Yeah,
I'm really struggling to understand why CDOT would just say, in this case, you want conditions for the final plat. Is the project permitted?
Yes.
So there would be a permit closure, and the permit applicant would have to work with the city to build that wall and do any construction materials testing in conjunction with the permit.
Yes.
I'm frankly opposed to this condition. I just think this is the very thing that the opposition to the last couple plats wants to have final plats recorded with conditions. So I don't understand why this is any different.
It's a, just to give you a little more context, it's a soil stabilized earth wall within the right of way. And so we just want to make sure that it's built according to plans.
Don't the permits require it be built according to the plans?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Does the applicant take any issue with removing that condition?
No, I mean, we're fine with having it removed.
Second. We have a motion to approve without the condition, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? Yes.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Law.
Chairman. I guess the only thing that I'm wondering is the distinction being that with the previous I think the point of discussion of the previous case, I think there's probably a difference between the monitoring of road paint and that of a stabilized wall. And perhaps what they're getting at with the amendment is that after, because to the point of discussion earlier, they won't get the plat until all the engineering pieces are met. But then what happens beyond that with the monitoring, I think is what they're trying to, the CEI services of continuous ongoing monitoring of that.
It doesn't make, I would agree. I share the concern, but that has to be addressed at the permit level, not the plat level.
My assumption would be that that would be handled through the building permit. Any retaining
Yeah,
wall
if
over.
they don't want to approve a permit, I mean, we get permits to relocate a stream, and they require 4 or 5 years of monitoring after the stream is relocated. That's not recorded in a plat. That was in order to get the permit to move the stream, we have to agree to the monitoring. So I just feel like the issue should be addressed at a permit level and not a plat.
I agree. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 8 on our agenda, case SD 2023-0044 is Edgestone Phase 2. Staff is it's a preliminary and final plat at Edgestone Phase 2. Staff is recommended to approve. Is there any opposition present? What's the will of the commission? We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Matthews recused himself. 2023-0058 has been withdrawn. Next case on our agenda is case 2023-0090. And this is located at 1824 Crabtree Road in some unaddressed property in the 1700 block of Thrasher Pike. Staff was recommended to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? All right. And is the applicant present? Thank you. Mr. Schultz.
Actually, the next case goes with this, 2023-91, but we'll take these one at a time if you want to. This is 2023-90. This is a special permit request for airport land or a landing strip. This is for the Dallas Bay Sky Park. It's an existing privately owned airport. Again, the proposed use is for airport landing strip and other facilities for aircraft, office, a general store, and other club amenities for the club members of the airport. You can see on the zoning map, this is currently zoned A1. The area outlined in the red is the existing landing strip, and that's the special permit area. There's been no recent zoning history for this site. Again, this is associated with case 2023-91 to rezone some abutting properties from A1 to different zone. Some adjacent land uses include single unit residential to the northwest, commercial to the west, residential under the construction to the south. You have single unit to the southeast, as recycling center and ball fields to the east. You can see on the screen where this is about 2,100 feet to the west of Hickson Pike. Again, it's existing landing strip. Here's an aerial view of that location of the landing strip, as well as the ball fields that are next door. There's a view of the landing strip and associated properties or a hangar that's on the site. Another view of the site. This is a view looking along Crabtree Road. This is adjacent to the site on Crabtree Road. Adjacent to the site on Crabtree. This is across from the site on Crabtree Road. The special permit has some review criteria you have to look at in terms of granting the permit. The property adjacent to the area, including the plant, will not be adversely affected. Staff recommends conditions related to the existing functions and development of the site to ensure neighboring properties will not be adversely affected, including limitation on the number of hangars, no expansion of the landing strip, and the proposed amenities to be used by private members only of the airport and not the general public. Second review criteria is the plan is consistent with intent and purpose of these regulations to promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. The airport plan is consistent with intent and purpose of these regulations to promote public safety, morals, and general welfare, but the airport will continue to operate in a private capacity with limited expansion opportunities. Finally, number 3, there is reasonable assurance that development will proceed according to the spirit and letter of approved plans. The conditions proposed by staff will ensure that development will proceed according to the spirit and letter of proposed plans. Staff recommended approval of the special permit with conditions. Staff also recommended to change the boundary of the airport, and we'll talk about that in a second. There were some uses that were proposed that staff felt were primary uses of the airport and not secondary uses, and should not be rezoned to commercial zoning designation. Also, the special permit for the airport is only permitted in A1 zones. That's why we recommended the boundary be changed to only include the airport, any associated uses with the airport as they're in the A1 zone. So staff recommended approve with 6 conditions. Airport traffic control towers or other towers are prohibited. Hangar space limited to the existing square footage shown on the site plan. No expansion of the existing landing strip is permitted. On-demand radio-activated runway lighting to be used as needed only. Uses limited to takeoffs, landings, private hangar space, self-service refueling, amenity spaces including small format general store, a gym, a clubhouse, office, a cafe, a pilot training building, and radio-related facilities. And finally, number 6, the airport and accessory uses shall operate for private members only. Again, this is not open to the public. Just some background information. The adjacent property, which is owned by Battle Creek and Dotzero property, they have property that's not in this special permit. There's been some legal battles going back and forth for many years between the airport and these 2 private property owners. The private property owners here, Battle Creek and Dotzero, have a permanent access easement to the airport. Anything that's zoning, we do through the special permit or zoning, does not impact those easements. Those are private matters. This only would impact the use of the airport and the zoning of the airport. Here is the original application we got. You can see the special permits highlighted in the red dotted area. There were some hangars and aviation support that were not included in that special permit boundary. Staff looked at that and felt it should be in the permit and asked the applicant to submit a revised special permit boundary. Those are now in the permit boundary. And you can see those on the screen. So the boundary has changed to include the hangars and the aviation support facilities as part of this special permit. So again, staff recommends approve of the special permit with 6 conditions.
Mr. Schultz, I have one question for you, but Dan, you can go first if you'd like.
I was going to say this is a little bit unusual because this is an existing airport. I did look this up about a month or so ago when it came forward. This airport is listed in our statewide aviation plan for the state of Tennessee, which I was, so this is a existing airport that's been in, I don't know when it was originally opened, but I think all we're trying to do here is just make it officially legally as a use in this site.
To follow up on Dan's point, the need for the special permit is triggered by the expansion of some of the facilities in terms of the hangars. They're making improvements, and we as staff could never find where a special permit was granted many, many years ago. I think this was originally a drag strip back in the 50s, and somewhere over that point it converted into an airport. But because they're making changes to the facilities and upgrading some of those things, it does trigger the need for the special permit, and that was working through Hamilton County Building Inspection. We all agreed the need for the special permit.
I have one question in regards to the conditions. Is there any possibility that any of our conditions would conflict with like an FAA requirement that would then create undue hardship or potential conflict?
I can't, maybe the applicant can answer that better than I can. I think the applicants here can probably speak better than that. And I think they do want to talk about some of the conditions.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for staff? All right, we'll hear from the applicant.
Jim Watson. I'm on Cross Timber Circle in Hickson. I've been in Middle Valley for 48 years.
Sir, are you the applicant?
No, I'm the opposition.
Okay,
Oh, I
we'll
thought
hear from the
opposition was
applicant
first.
first.
Excuse me?
Sorry, we'll hear from the applicant first.
I'm sorry.
Not at all.
Good afternoon. I'm Brad Brackett with Reagan Smith. And from our standpoint, we're good with all the conditions. So if there's any other questions you have of us, we can respond to those.
Thank you. So do you want to yield your time and we'll hear from the opposition? And then, okay. All right, sir. And if anybody else wishes to speak in opposition, come on up to the mic.
I'm Jim Watson. I live in Cross Timber Circle in Hickson for 48 years. I've seen a lot of good happen in Middle Valley. I've seen a lot of not so good happen in Middle Valley. And I'm partially against this development for a few reasons. One in particular, I'll get to the end. There's going to be increased traffic. And if you know anything about Middle Valley, Hickson Pike, there's been nothing done. I mean, zero done in 25 years to improve traffic. It's just getting worse and worse and worse. There's going to be more flooding. You could say you put the retention pond in. I know a few retention ponds that don't work and nobody will come and check them. There's not going to help unemployment because there is none. You just have to get somebody to come to your house. Good luck. There's no problem with unemployment. Every place I've ever been or known, when you increase the density of a community, you increase taxes. So taxes are not going to be reduced by this development. But the number one thing that concerns me is it puts another boundary on Middle Valley Recreation Area. There's houses on one side, there's a road on the other. There's this airport, which has been out of business for about a year. Would have been the perfect place to make Middle Valley Rec a first-class recreational area. And now that's going to be stifled. I guess if anything would be a compromise, if some of the land that's in question could be ceded to Middle Valley Rec, and I am not in any way, form, or fashion part of Middle Valley Rec, other than my kids and my grandkids have played there. If some of that land could be ceded to Middle Valley Rec so it could be expanded. But right now it's sort of a level 2 recreation area. They can't get many tournaments because they just don't have the facilities. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll actually hear opposition on both cases 2023-0091 and 0090. I think that was opposition to 0091. And then you may have the same. And then we'll take action on them separately.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. I'm Stan Sewell, 608 Stonebrook Drive. I'm here representing Battle Creek Power Sports. We have adjacent property there, as Mr. Schultz mentioned, that the applications and staff recommendations are, from July, when you guys deferred this, are unchanged. I just wanted to point out that those recommendations were initially developed when staff did not have any knowledge of the easements that exist, or Chancellor Fleener's order that's out there, or the litigation that's going on. The applicant was required to and failed to submit to RPA staff information related to the accessory structures that you all have seen are actually the most prominent adjacent properties and structures to the property that is subject to these applications. These are owned by Dodsero LLC and Battle Creek Power Sports LLC. It's also probably important to note that the applicants does not own this property, and there's no guarantee that they will. The parcels owned by Dodsero and Battle Creek have a perpetual express deeded easement appurtenant to use the airport, including the facilities. So additionally, there's a navigation easement that was provided to Dallas-based Sky Park in 2020 by the property owner, Aviation Integrated Resources. This easement specifically prohibits the development of structures on the property owned by Aviation Integrated Resources, both parcels. Because the staff was unaware of these easements, I presume they developed recommendations that would adversely affect our properties, at least in my view when I read this. With regard to 2023-0090, criteria A, that amenities can only be used by private members. It seems that would adversely affect property rights that Battle Creek and Dodsero have. Our easement provides for use of the entire airport and expressly provides for use of the facilities. This would also conflict with the Chancellor's order, which specifically provides for our use of the beacon, runway lighting, controls, and 3 hangars. Criteria B states that the airport will operate in a private capacity. This is inconsistent with historical use and the use at the time the easements were granted. This would adversely affect the property rights of Dodsero and Battle Creek. Condition 2, limiting square footage of hangars to that shown on the site plan. Dodsero owns 2 tracks. There's a concern there that they wouldn't be able to add a hangar if they want to. I understand it's not drawn in this site plan, but these conditions I'm reading needs to be subject to the airport, of which the parcels that are owned by Dodsero and Battle Creek are a part of. Condition 5 limits the use to a few specified purposes that only consider the uses the applicant expressed interest in. The list does not include historical uses such as flight training, maintenance facilities. It appears to specifically disallow hangar rentals. Condition 6 states the airport can only be used by private members. This is a reiteration of criteria A, and it seems to be stating that Battle Creek and Dodsero can't exercise their easement rights unless the interpretation of that is that we would be able to and have to set up our own private membership so we can exercise our easement rights. Limiting to private members seems to eliminate the historical use for, again, the hangar rentals, flight training, or maintenance facilities. And with regard to 0091, I believe, I don't know if I'm subject to any, I didn't understand there were any updates to this. My understanding was there'd been no updates, but the R3 that was recommended as far as, that I understand, that specifically does not allow any airport related activities. And that is specifically in contrast to what the applicant stated they're going to use this for. They were going to put homes with hangars in that area. And if that does encompass, I'm not sure now because I maybe don't have the latest drawings there. If the existing hangars or facilities are there, you could not use those for aviation activity either. Only R2A and A1 allow for aviation activity. So for those reasons, I would ask you guys tonight.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bill Godbold. I'm legal counsel for Dodge Cerro LLC. Dodge Cerro is owned by Tiff Dotson and Peter Saradino. They own the 2 tracts of land at the Dallas Bay Sky Park along with Battle Creek. In fact, they own 3 parcels that were originally part of the 6 parcels that made up the Dallas Bay Sky Park, which has been in operation about 50 years. They still use the airport. They still land and take off. They have 2 hangars there. They hangar their aircraft there. They use it. Back in 2021, a lawsuit was filed against Dodge Cerro and Battle Creek seeking to rescind or invalidate the perpetual easements.
Hey, sir, I hate to interrupt you, but the last fellow also spent quite a bit of time talking about the lawsuit and the easements, and those are not in our purview, and we will not take them into consideration in any way, shape, or form. So you can spend your entire time talking about the lawsuit and the easements and your specific private property rights, and we will not take any of that into consideration in making these decisions. It's not in our purview.
I understand that. With all due respect, I wanted the commission to be under the agency to be aware that there's a preliminary injunction that's in effect in that lawsuit that prohibits restricting the use of the airport and its facilities. So to the extent these proposals, recommendations, and conditions run afoul of that, that's a problem. And I just want to bring that to the agency's attention. And that's all I have, unless someone has any specific questions about the lawsuit or the injunction or the easements for that matter. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Noah Johnston. I live in the Cross Timbers neighborhood, very close to there. This site is 55.45 acres of already cleared and deforested land that would be perfect for affordable housing. According to information that some data that Rocket Homes collected, the median sale price currently is $350,000 for homes. According to the census, right now the per capita income is $36,900. Do the math, it's plain to see that the average Hamilton County resident can't afford an average house. 12.6% of us are living in poverty. We're being priced out of real estate investment. We need real estate inventory in the affordable range, not townhomes outfitted with private airplane hangars for non-residents of the county to purchase or lease. Not only will this project negatively affect our housing issues, it will also expose our community to increased lead pollution. According to an article published by MIT titled Unfriendly Skies, piston engine aircraft pose a significant health threat. Piston-driven GA aircraft, like the ones that we'll be seeing coming and going from the Dallas Bay Air Park, account for about half of anthropogenic lead emissions in U.S. skies. They later on say that those exposed to low levels of lead, especially children, have been shown to suffer neurological and cognitive impairment, including IQ loss. I would like to see this zoning change denied on the account that it will be an irresponsible use of valuable real estate in order to provide recreation opportunity to non-residents whose activities will increase the community's lead exposure. Side note, I'd like to add, we recently had our gas lines replaced in the neighborhood that I live in. The lead on that job, I was chatting with him. He said, y'all should expect to have your water lines replaced soon too, because it appears as though the ones that you have are the outdated ones lined with asbestos. So in closing, I'd just like to say I'm already drinking asbestos. I would like to not breathe lead in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
How's everybody? I'm Chris Lewis. I own property at 8016 Hale Road. It's kind of the northwest boundary across from the airport. Got about 3 acres. I'm concerned about the environmental effects. My youngest son raises honeybees on the backside of my property. So I would really be concerned with the development on that side. It's a wooded area. It's a direct access across 6 and 5 for the bees, for water. So I would be opposed for that reason. And also there is a lot of older people that live in that area. And I think it would have a dire effect for property taxes, and it would have very much effect on people with limited budgets. Thanks.
Thank you.
Cassie, is the clock working? Okay. The applicant, do you want to respond to any of that? We'd love to hear your comments on what we've heard.
We're good with the conditions on both cases, and so we appreciate staff's recommendation for approval. So unless there's any specific questions that you have of us, we're good to go.
Mr. Chairman, and I did not go through case 2023-91.
Right.
Mr.
Mr. Matthews.
Either for staff. Item number 6, is that your recommendation on the private member only?
Yes. I believe all these conditions came from Ron Cassie. I mean, I think these all came from staff.
Is that something that we can actually put in the recommendations there?
I think the question is it a public airport or a private airport? And I think this is privately owned. It's not currently legally zoned. And that's what we're doing today. But I mean, I think the question is, would it be available for public use, like a general aviation airport where you can land your plane?
Yeah, that's my question. And maybe the applicant could answer that. If someone's flying from Knoxville wants to land for fuel, is that what you would be doing, or you could do or couldn't do, or if someone has an airplane near there, can they land and refuel? I'm just trying to find out how, if it's for members only, that means someone else outside cannot land there at all. Is that what you're?
Well, I think they recognize that there are circumstances where landing might occur. So there's not really a way to prohibit, but as far as sort of a public listing, there are publicly licensed airports, there are private airports. And what this would be is one that would not be a publicly licensed airport. It would be a private one, but that does not necessarily mean that it prohibits others from landing there, because we recognize there are circumstances that would arise that.
Okay, so you can't prohibit it. Okay. So can we put this in our?
I think if you look at number 5, there were some uses that's proposed in terms of like a general store, a gym, a clubhouse, an office, cafe. That's what condition number 6 is trying to say. Any of those accessory uses such as those can only be used by the private members of this airport and not the general public. That was the intent behind condition number 6.
Well, it's talking about landing and taking off and refueling is my question. Can we prevent someone, by our action from that?
I'm not an airport expert, and I'm sure there's lawyers out there if we wanted to find one. But I think this is the question of, is it publicly regulated? Meaning, could anyone fly from any part of the United States and land here and take off? I think this is privately owned, so someone could, I assume, if they had to, stop and get fuel.
Okay.
I have one question.
I can answer that if you'd like. We're not going to shoot them down. And the vast majority of airports in the United States are actually private airports. It just means that someone, if they have an issue, they can land there. They have the right to land there for safety. You actually have the right to land anywhere for safety, except for restricted zones. But it means that they are not allowed to take advantage of the amenities that are on property if they're not a member. That's what specifically it calls for.
So I have a question from staff. We saying this is, as it's operating now, it's non-conforming? It's not have the proper permits to operate as it's been operating for 50 years?
It's been grandfathered in, is my understanding, for many, many years. There has not been a special permit, but now because improvements are taking place, you have to get the special permit complied.
So if the gentleman that we're wanting to use this, somebody has to have a permit to have this, no matter who's using it, it's supposed to have this permit. Is that correct?
No.
It's not compliant.
It's a non-conforming use right now.
And it is operating as a,
Well, somebody has been.
someone's been
somebody-
landing and taking off from there without an appropriate permit. So no matter who's going to land there,
The county has not permitted it other than it being an
it
existing
wouldn't,
use.
so the special exemption permit, unless we want to close the thing down, this has to be done. Is that?
Well, I don't think they can do any other improvements there without having a legal.
It would remain as is. You can't make any improvements to it. Correct, no matter who owns it.
Mr. Matthews.
I still, it's going through I cannot get my head around this. Even item number 5, can we as a body put regulations on someone's clubhouse or someone's?
I
I've got a problem.
I share your concern. I think what Mr. Matthews is struggling with is, if this were any other use, we've not been accustomed to seeing uses that are restricted to members. So for example, if somebody wanted to open a bar, we haven't seen a staff recommendation to approve a bar.
I have a private one up the street from me.
Subject
so
to
actually
it being
counts.
by members only.
Let me go, can I go through the rezoning case?
Sure.
Maybe this helps tell you where we came from on those conditions, because the rezoning request, which is 2023-91, looking at the screen, the applicant requested R3, and then to the north, you see C3 sitting there. That's where the hangars and gym, the clubhouse and all that, at that time, we thought had to be rezoned C3. R3 across the street. Talking to the applicant, we realized this is a private airport. It's private members only. So we felt it should be included in the special permit. The problem with that C3 is if it goes in, it can be open to the public to use. We didn't want a wide open restaurant sitting there for the general public to go to. I look at this no different than Chattanooga Airport. It has restaurants in it. Anything associated with that airport, you can have. So we looked at this, went round and round, and from this, we recommended, go through all the same pictures and everything. On the zoning case, staff recommends not C3, but recommends R3 with conditions that ensure compatibility with the surrounding land uses and development form. Again, staff previously recommended the applicant apply for C3 for the proposed airport amenity uses, which was the gym, the clubhouse, the recreational store. Were later determined in review, these should fall under the special permit boundary. That's why we included that boundary to include these areas, which is in case 2023-90. From that, to make sure it didn't still be used to the public, we put a condition that had to be used for the private members of that airport. So that's sort of where that condition came from. The staff recommends to R3 with conditions. Single unit detached dwellings and townhomes can be developed under the horizontal property regime or individual lots only. Townhomes are only allowed between the existing landing strip and the north parcel line of parcel 83144. Multifamily residential complexes are prohibited. Has a max density of 2 dwelling units per acre. A type B landscape buffer shall be provided for the entire lot frontage on Thrasher Pike, except for curb cut for ingress and egress. And all garages / roll-up doors shall face the landing strip for all residences located between the existing landing strip and the north parcel of 83144. So looking at those conditions of the special permit was trying to prevent this clubhouse or store to come into the public use for everybody to go to. We felt it'd be more important to limit that to private use of those members of that airport, similar to a golf course community. And Emily would like to.
I also just want to clarify that in general, the special permits are meant to go through this additional review. And so because they're more unique in nature than a regular use by right, like a restaurant or something. So that was another reason why we added these more specific conditions that you might not normally see, because this is a more unique use. And since it had already been operating, just trying to bring it back into legal compliance and without adding additional nuisances by adding some of these accessory uses that are only specific to the airport, if that helps.
I think so. Thank you. Yes. Commissioner Schulte.
I'd like to make a motion to approve with conditions.
So in regards to case 2023-0091, we have staff recommendation to approve with conditions, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion?
it's 90 or 91? Are we taking them separately?
90. I'm sorry, I meant to say 90. So thank you. We are taking them separately. So this is
Yeah.
the special permit, which is 90. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I recuse.
And case 2023-0091, which is located at 1824 Crabtree Road, and it's the rezoning from A1 and R2A to R3 multifamily and C3 general business commercial district with conditions. Is the applicant okay with those conditions?
Mr. Chairman, staff recommendation is to deny the applicant request, which was that C3. We're recommending to approve R3 only for the entire site with conditions.
Gotcha. Okay. The applicant said they were good with the conditions. Yes. Yes. We have a motion to approve with conditions, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed?
Mr. Chairman, I recuse.
Motion carries.
It goes to county commission. Both will go to county commission next month.
Next case on the agenda is a mandatory referral. It's 2023-0123. And it's for a right-of-way abandonment at 5101 block of Strickland Circle, and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? What's the will of the commission? I don't see any opposition. We have a staff recommendation to approve the mandatory.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is 2023-0132, and this is located at 3320 and 3440 Lightfoot Mill Road, and it's an application to rezone from R2 to M1. Staff is recommended to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Hold on one second. Is the applicant present? Are you the applicant? Do you want to speak to the conditions? For the record, we do have a motion to approve.
Again with Labella Associates. The applicant is also a surrounding property owner in the residential zone and is currently already installing a street tree area in front of his property. So he does not wish to have a landscape type C buffer on top of that as well. So we are asking for this condition to be stricken.
Mr. Schultz, can you pull up the site map? So the surrounding zone would be what?
Yeah, so he owns the R1 to the south, and he owns various parcels past the M1 as well. And then I think he owns across the street, but I'm not quite sure which one of those. But we're already installing a street yard buffer all along Lightfoot Mill. So a street tree buffer is already required by code.
And that condition the staff proposed was, in addition to the type C would be along this section, along Lightfoot Mill, not to the rear. He would be along Lightfoot Mill. We're abutting R1.
Right. So we're just saying that there's already a street tree buffer or a street tree requirement there. So adding another 10-foot buffer isn't really necessary.
Any questions for the applicant? Okay, we've got a motion to approve. Is that with or without conditions? Applicant's request. And was your second? Okay. Any discussion? So that is a motion to approve without condition. And it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case, 2023-0135 has been withdrawn. And I'm going to turn it over to Vice Chairman Lehman for one case.
Okay, thank you. So item number 7 on on old business is case 2023-0130. It's located at 2409, 2411, 2417, and unaddressed property on East Main Street. It's a rezone from C2 Convenience Commercial Zone to C3 Central Business Zone with conditions. Has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition that would like to speak? Is the applicant present? Are you good with the conditions? Having a motion to approve with conditions. Did not see any opposition. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Lehman. First item under new business is case 2023-0139, and this is located at 10319 London Lane and some unaddressed properties at 10300 block of London Lane. Staff has recommended to approve with conditions an application to rezone from A1 to R1. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present?
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Price, do you want to speak to the conditions?
I do. Do you want staff to proceed or would you like me to proceed?
Maybe it's helpful to hear from you first.
Okay. So the staff has 3 conditions. This property is located off of London Lane, adjacent to where Silverdale Baptist currently is building a satellite campus. We did submit a site plan after making applications. As I'm sure all of you are aware, a site plan is not required, but we did submit one after the case had originally been submitted. We are fine with condition 1, which limits us to a maximum density of 3.5 units per acre. The second condition is one that gives us trouble. It says no development, including structures, paving, and detention ponds within the floodplain or floodway. Passive pedestrian recreation units are allowed within the floodplain and floodway. And then the third condition, also a 25-foot landscape buffer shall be provided for the entire lot frontage along London Lane, with the exception of a curb cut for ingress egress. So as it relates to London Lane, there is a wetlands that is out there. We cannot landscape in a wetland, so we need to leave the wetlands alone. So that would strike condition number 3 in its entirety. And as you can see on the site plan, that shaded area basically indicates the current wetlands area. So essentially number 3 is achieved by the fact that we have an environmental concern on site that has to be addressed in the fact of leaving it alone. With respect to the second condition, we always are permittable to fill within floodplains within the county. And so I don't see any reason why we should be restricted from that particular use on this property, especially given that the church was allowed to fill in the floodplain. We will stay out of the floodway, of course, but so we see striking of conditions 2 and 3, but we would agree with condition 1. So if there's any questions, be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
I'd love to hear the staff presentation and the reason for those conditions. I think it'd be helpful for us to hear.
This is a request to rezone from A1 to R1 for single unit residential, about 16 acres in size, proposing 57 units. That's a density of 3.39. The applicant did provide a condition of no more than 3.5 units per acre. Looking at the zoning map, the zoning history, there's been no zoning history in this area for this particular piece of property. However, abutting it to the west, there was a PUD, an A1 to R1 with a PUD that was approved with conditions. In 2016, there was another piece of property to the west along East Brandon Road that was rezoned from A1 to R1 with a PUD with conditions. And then to the east of this site along London Lane, in 2008, that property was rezoned from A1 to R1 with a PUD. Looking at the zoning map, everything to the north is A1, to the east is A1, and to the west is A1, C2, and R1. And just the south of London Lane, that's in Georgia. Looking at the zoning map, the church is under construction to the southwest of the site. To the east is single unit residential, large lot, agriculture uses. And to the west, abutting East Brainerd Road is single unit residential, and to the north is agriculture uses. As mentioned, there is a floodplain and floodway on this property located to the west of the site. Here's a view of the site. View of the site from London Lane. This is looking south of the site on London Lane. This is the development west of the site along East Brainerd Road. This is the intersection of East Brainerd Road and London Lane. This property is located in the White Oak Mountain Area Plan, which was adopted in 2019. The place type recommendation was conservation-based residential and reserve. Primary uses include single unit living detached and attached up to 2 dwelling units per acre. It did state in this plan that if sewers are extended to this area, that the place type designation shifted to suburban residential. There is sewers along London Lane, so the place type designation did shift to, instead of conservation-based, to suburban place type, which again recommends single family detached. But the density goes up to 3 dwelling units per acre. 3 to 5. Looking at the site, this place type designation, you can see where it does recommend along the floodplain that be reserved because of the floodplains in the area. At the time we reviewed this, we did not have a site plan, so we were looking based slowly on the policies of the adopted plan. That's where the conditions 2 and 3 come from, was based on the plan recommendations to preserve development in the floodplain and floodway. And the plan also recommended landscape buffers or some type of buffer along our existing streets. So that's where condition 2 and 3 came from staff. It was policy guidance in the adopted plan.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Questions?
I do have a question. Mike, is that land, the wetlands there on the front, is that deeper than 25 feet?
It is far deeper. Plus, in addition to that, you have a 30-foot setback that keeps you from developing within 30 feet of that. So it's de facto some 60 to 100 feet in width. So in essence, there is a buffer that is located along the front. We just simply can't landscape it. And so 3 is met by the fact that there is wetlands on
But
site.
you are off of London Lane a considerable distance further than what the recommendation was. And then I guess the other question I had is the floodplain. I don't remember, I don't remember ever turning down or talking about a floodplain development. Is that accurate? Brian, do we do that often for the floodplain?
I don't recall. It's very limited, but in this case, we have a plan that says, that area should be reserved. So that's one of the reasons we as staff recommended.
Even after with the place type changing with the sewer?
Yes, it still has that reserve. It did not change.
Okay. I guess in my mind, it's just we're desperate for housing stock, and I don't think we should. I just think we're clearly in need of housing if we can get it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff or the applicant?
Second.
Okay. I have a motion to approve with one condition, the maximum density of 3.5 dwelling units per acre has been seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, second case under new business is a mandatory referral 2023-0140. It's an unopened 1,100 block of West 53rd Street. It's a mandatory referral for right-of-way abandonment, has a staff recommendation to deny. Is the applicant present? Okay, is there opposition currently? Okay, Mr. Schultz, if you'll, and then ma'am, if you want to come up, we'll hear from staff and then you'll have an opportunity.
This is case MR 2023-140. This request is to abandon the right-of-way. Proposed use is a driveway. You can see on the screen here, this property is currently zoned R1. It's in between 2 existing parcels or lots. There's no zoning history on this particular piece of property. To the north and south is single unit residential, and to the east is vacant. That's Hawkins Ridge, which is under conservation easement, and to the west is single unit residential. There are a little bit of slopes on the property to the rear along Hawkins Ridge. Here's a view of the site. This is West 53rd Street. The site's just in the middle there of the picture. Staff reviewed this and recommended to deny. The request does not meet the requirements for the City of Chattanooga right-of-way closure and abandonment policy. The right-of-way could provide future public access to service the adjacent properties in Hawkins Ridge. And you can see on the screen here, the site is labeled where the right-of-way closure will be. That looks like the only real access to some of Hawkins Ridge lots back there in the back. You do have another access point off of towards the east in Alton Park, but this does look like it provides somewhat of a better access to these lots. The applicant could seek a temporary use permit or reduce the proposed abandonment width of what's being recommended to be closed. But based on those review criteria, staff recommended to deny this request.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff? And then remind us, Mr. Schultz, once it comes out of Planning Commission with a recommendation, it goes to City of Chattanooga Public Works for review prior to going to City Council?
Correct. This does not automatically go next month to City Council. This will go back to our Transportation Department. They'll do an in-depth review, more analysis on it. From that, they'll make a recommendation and place it on the City Council agenda for their ultimate action.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Yes, ma'am. If you'll give your name and address, you've got, I think, 9 minutes.
Hello, my name is Sharon J. Lewis. I live at 5208 Sunnyside Avenue with my husband. We've been there over 35 years. And until I asked for a survey of the property, I thought my driveway was my driveway, but it seems the driveway is part of the row, totally, almost. So that's why I put in this paperwork. Now, if I thought it stopped here when I saw deny, but it does not.
Correct. We make, Mr. Schultz, or if you want to finish, we can answer that afterwards, but
basically, that's my question is, if it does not stop here, then as an ignorant person, just resident, I need to know what to do to go further, at least to get the partial abandonment for myself and for my neighbor who also has the driveway right on the road. And there's no way, there's no houses behind me, no lots, except mostly owned by people who don't want the ridge to be developed. I'm done.
Thank you. And I'll just, from a process perspective relative to rezonings and mandatory referrals, this is a deliberation where we can hear the Planning Commission makes recommendations to the legislative bodies. Mandatory referrals are a little bit different. They will go back through one more review with City of Chattanooga Public Works, but we'll make a recommendation and then this will go on to the City Council. Yes. Yes, sir.
Brian, I've got a question. If this is denied today and it's denied by City Council, what are the other avenues for the applicant to get either a reduced abandonment or some sort of temporary use? Can you talk about the other options that would exist?
A temporary use permit would go, I think that still goes through City Council for approval, I believe. So you'd have to get with, I would encourage you to get with our Transportation Department staff. We can give you the contact information if you want to seek the temporary use permit, or even what happens today. Once the Planning Commission, it will go back from that Transportation Department for in-depth review. You can have discussions with them on maybe reducing the abandonment or, supporting your review when it gets in front of the City Council.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, sir.
And I have a motion too, Chairman. I sympathize with the applicant and I think we can find a way around what you need and what the public interest is, but that's a whole lot of land that we would be cutting off, and that's land that could have a future public use if we didn't cut it off as a preserve of some kind. So I move denial.
I have a motion to deny has been seconded. Mr. Mabee, did you still have a comment? Okay. I have a motion to deny. It has been seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And yes, ma'am, they can give you some information relative to maybe your next steps.
Oh, but there is another access to that area off of West 55th.
Understood, but we did take action. So thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I've got a question on that. This is a city right of way. Why would they need a temporary use permit? It's a right of way. Why do you need a permit? Never. Yeah, they're using it. They've been using it. Why do you have to have it? It's a city right of way.
Yeah, I'm not going to answer that. I don't know if Mr.
Anybody-
Schultz can, but I don't think anybody's going to go out there and cut off or deny access
I didn't
through
know
that.
They
So,
need anything.
yeah. Thank you.
Next case on the agenda, item 3, is case 2023-0141, and this is located at 1812 Hickory Valley Road. Staff is recommended to approve a rezoning request from R1 to RTZ. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? What's the will of the commission? We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? Did you want to comment on you have a staff recommendation to approve, you have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Your mic's not on.
I'm sorry, Mike Price, MAP Engineers. But I have had conversations with the councilwoman out there, and we would like to put into the record some conditions coming forth out of Planning Commission, if we might, just so that we address some of the concerns that we had at a neighborhood meeting. And I have 5 conditions, which I can read and then hand a copy to Brian. And if the commission feels accepting of these, then that can go into moving forward at city council. Condition 1, a minimum 4-foot tall black aluminum decorative fence shall be installed along the right of way of Hickory Valley Road, which terminates on either side of the entrance road into a masonry, stone, or brick structure where the subdivision name is depicted. Fencing shall also have brick, stone, or masonry columns installed a minimum spacing of 50 feet on center. That's condition 1. Condition 2, minimum 2-inch caliber trees and a minimum of 3 3-gallon shrubs shall be planted along the right of way of Hickory Valley Road. Trees shall be planted at a minimum of 20 feet on center, beginning 25 feet on either side of the entrance from each edge of pavement. And a minimum of 3 shrubs shall be planted between the trees, so stated. Density limited to 8 homes per acre. 4, development shall have a common outdoor amenity area for the residents of this development. And 5, a sidewalk shall be constructed along Hickory Valley Road as required by CDOT. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can staff speak to that first condition? And we just ran into this last week because it's so specific on what that fence material has to be. We have ran into one where it was specific to a vinyl fence, a chain link fence. The applicant now has moved forward, doesn't want to put in a fence, actually want to put in a better looking fence, but because it's so specific on what type of fence, the LDO is making this person go back through to amend the condition, which is a 3-month process. Could be the same situation here. It's very specific on what that fence material has to be.
I just think I was going to say the same thing. I was going to say I'm really opposed to condition 1, and I would voice my opposition for the full 9 minutes that I get to voice my opposition in regards to condition 1. It is ours as a body to condition to protect the interests of the public, to protect from nuisances. We live in Hamilton County. We live in the state of Tennessee. It's really fantastic thing that we have conditional zoning. That is an abuse of conditional zoning, in my opinion. If city council wants to abuse conditional zoning, they're free to do that. There's certainly nothing that we can do to stop that. If Planning Commission wants to abuse its authority for conditional zoning, they certainly can do that, because I will not make a motion or vote on this case. But I think that's an abuse of conditional zoning. And I've called it out in other cases already today. If we're going to abuse conditional zoning, I'm going to call it what it is when I see it.
And I'm fine if we wanted to take just conditions 2 through 5 that were written.
What was 5 again? Because that one
A
gave me
sidewalk shall be constructed along Hickory Valley Road as required by CDOT.
Well, that's required under our subdivision regulations.
I think the residents just wanted to be assured of that.
Okay, so again, 5, can I see those?
Also, Mr. Chairman, I think condition 3 for the density, that's already regulated in the zoning regulations of a maximum of 8 dwelling units per acre.
There hasn't been a motion or a second, has there? There was a motion and a second to approve. There is a motion and a second. Any discussion? The motion was to approve the staff recommendation. And it was seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr. Price, thank you for bringing these, and I think it's fantastic to have a meeting with the neighborhood and, make sure to communicate that you did
Yes, sir.
actually bring these to Planning Commission.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next case on the agenda is case 2023-0142. And it's located at 8911 and 8913 Bill Reed Road. And it's an application to rezone from R5 to M1, and staff is recommended to deny. Is there any opposition present? And is the applicant present?
Mr. Chairman, we did receive an email in opposition to this case.
Okay. Can you take us through it, Mr. Schultz?
Sure. This is 2023-142. This is request to rezone R5 single wide manufacturing home district to M1 industrial district for automobile and self-storage. Property is 1.5 acres in size. Looking at the zoning map, everything to the north, east, and west is zoned R5, and to the south across Bill Reed Road is A1. Looking at the general area, you see no manufacturing zone in this general vicinity. There is no zoning history for this site, but to the northeast of this site in 83 to 8500 blocks of Appleton Pike, that was rezoned to M1. That's the Volkswagen plant. So in this general area, there is no manufacturing abutting this property. Here's a view of the site. To the east is a manufactured home park. To the north is vacant property. To the west is manufactured home. And to the southwest is institutional. And to the south is single unit residential. Here's a view of the site. This is a view of the site, what's being used on the property. South of the site. This is southwest of the site, that church. East of the site, which is a manufactured home park. West of the site. And this is looking along Bill Reed Road. You see the manufactured home park to the east of the site. This is in the White Oak Mountain Area Plan, which was adopted in 2019, which recommends countryside residential. The primary uses are single unit, living detached, accessory dwelling units. Secondary uses include multi-unit detached units, ADUs, and townhomes. It doesn't mention anything about manufacturing uses in this place type. Again, a closer view of the place type recommendation, which is countryside residential. This request is not compatible with the White Oak Mountain Area Plan. It is not compatible with surrounding land uses. It is not compatible with the development form. The proposed M1 district would introduce a wide range of incompatible uses to this area. So staff recommended to deny this request.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Mr. Payne.
There. No, it's in violation. I believe that's why they're in front of us today. Nothing. You're looking at a rezoning request to make this the M1. He has to bring this into compliance with the current zoning. This is the county, maybe Todd can answer better than I can. They have a health and safety sanitation board that would address some of this, but this is the uses that are not allowed in that current zone. He would have to comply with the current A1 zone uses, which is primary single family residential. The only way to get out of that is to rezone the M1, which introduced M1 type uses in this area.
Yeah, just for clarification, then I have one question. Yeah, so the remedy for non-compliance, it goes to the county attorney's office, and one of the remedies is to rezone to get in compliance. If it was denied here, then there would be a zoning case filed in Chancery Court that would be, and that's how the county settles all of their zoning compliance, health and safety issues. It's court. And so that would be the remedy without a rezoning. And I guess I just have one question. So a vehicle storage repair use and a mini warehouse self-storage, that's M1? Is that, I'm not saying I agree, disagree with the current use. I was just, is M1 the
I'll
only?
look while the applicant speaks.
Okay, thank you.
Please introduce yourself and state the reason for your request.
Yeah, my name is Rajesh Patel. Just only thing like there's like a violation the zoning, but the tenant already there and he said like that's all his own vehicle, so he's storing all this vehicle over there. So is it illegal to store his vehicle over there or what? Like his question is like does he own his vehicle?
It is illegal. Yes. I think that was your question, right? Yes.
And to answer Commissioner Lehman's question, automobile wrecking yards and storage yards are not prohibited in this commercial zones. Even if it was commercial, the plan would not support commercial uses here either.
I was just, the M1 obviously is a big jump. Thank
It's
you.
that outdoor storage component.
Thank you.
Sure. We have a staff recommendation to deny. We have a motion to deny. It has been properly seconded. We do have some opposition here. I think they want to speak. There's a staff recommendation to deny. There's a motion to deny. We're about to deny this. Is what's about to happen. Do you wish to say anything? Okay. It will go on to county commission. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next case on the agenda is case 2023-0143. We have an application here to rezone from A1 to O1. Staff is recommended to deny it. It's located at 6421 Ottawa Georgetown Road. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? All right.
And we did receive multiple emails in opposition to this as well.
All right. Mr. Schultz.
This is case 2023-143. This is a request to rezone part of the property from A1 to O1 for an office. The requested area to be rezoned is 1.08 acres in size. Looking at the zoning map, there's A1 to the north, A1 to the south, A1 to the east and west. A little further south along Ottawa Georgetown Road, you do see E2 along Brett Lane. But in this general vicinity, there is no O1 zone until you get further south, perhaps of Ottawa Georgetown Road and Lee Highway. Here's a view. Sorry, I misspoke. There is O1 at Amos Road, but that was just recently rezoned last week from O1 to C3 at the Scott County Commission. There has been no zoning history for this particular piece of property. It's a single unit residential. To the north is single unit residential, and to the east is single unit residential, and to the south is single unit. Here's a view of the site. Another view of the site. Another view of the site. This is north of the site, which is a single family dwelling. This is a view south of the site, east of the site. This is looking along Ottawa Georgetown Road. Again, another piece of property in the White Oak Mountain Area Plan, which was adopted in 2019. The place type designation was suburban residential, which primary uses include single unit living detached and detached uses. It does list secondary uses as being multiple single unit living detached on one lot, single unit living attached, which is townhomes, ADUs, manufactured homes, and STVRs. It doesn't mention anything about office uses or O1 zone. There's a closer view of that place type designation, which is again suburban residential. Proposal for O1 and the uses in the O1 are not compatible with adopted land use plan. It is not compatible with adjacent land uses or development form. Approving O1 would introduce a new development form along Ooltewah Georgetown Road. Again, the plan recommended commercial type uses further to the south, the Ooltewah Georgetown Road and Lee Highway, more of the commercial node zones. So staff recommended to deny this request.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? All right.
Hello, Aaron Aho with 40 by 40 Construction. I don't have any problem with this denial, so it's fine.
What's the will of the commission? We have a motion to deny and it has been properly seconded. Any
Mr. Chairman,
discussion?
he certainly has the right to go on the county commission. Does the applicant wish to withdraw the case? Or do you think he would like to move on?
We do have a motion to deny and it has been seconded at this point. So, any discussion on that? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Hey, and it was odd for you to respond that way. So I guess staff is wondering whether or not what maybe your intention with the property is, or with the application anyways. Okay. Yeah. So we've got a second motion on the case to allow the applicant to withdraw it, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? Oh, yeah, per applicant's request. And all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is a mandatory referral. It's case 2023-0144, and it's the 1000 block of Lupton Drive. Staff is recommended to approve the sewer easement abandonment. Is there any opposition? We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is 2023-0146. And this is located at 5468 Old Hickson Pike. Staff is recommended to approve with conditions the applicant's request to rezone from O1 and C2 with conditions to C2 convenience commercial zone. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? Okay, and I don't see an applicant. And we have opposition, so I'm a little concerned by that. All right, why don't we hear from the opposition first?
Once again, Noah Johnson, Middle Valley. I just wanted to state that I'd like to see this project denied on account of the current stream buffer vegetation not being adequate enough to sustain protection of the creek from construction pollutants. I think it should be our goal as a community to protect the riparian zone of North Chickamauga Creek. This stretch of Old Hickson Pike is one of the closest proximities to the creek of any of the commercially developed areas in the entire county. I think the real estate on this stretch of road should be limited to residential zoning with the eventual goal of a greenway trail running parallel to the creek, which can eventually connect to the Greenway Farms Park Trail system. This would ensure that the Hamilton County residents have opportunities to enjoy the natural resources of North Chickamauga Creek for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, ours is not necessarily to delve into issues like riparian buffers and those sorts of things. These properties are ultimately regulated by TDEC and Hampton County to make sure that those sorts of environmental assets are protected. And there's a host of regulations that do govern that. Ours is just to rezone the property. We do have a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. We have a motion to approve. Need a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case 2023-0147. It's located at 506 and 508 Ashland Terrace. And it's an application to rezone from R1 to C2 convenience commercial zone. Staff is recommended to deny. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present?
Mr. Chairman, we did receive some emails in opposition to this.
Thank you. Mr. Schultz? You want to take us through it?
Sure. 2023-147. This is off Ashland Terrace. That's 1.4 acres in size. The request is rezoned from R1 to C2 for convenience commercial zone for warehouse and shop. Looking at the zoning map, this is zoned R1. To the north across Ashland Terrace is O1. To the west of this property, I believe that's in the city of Red Bank. To the south is R1. To the east is R1. And the north is R3 and O1. If you go further east along Ashland Terrace, you do see C2 at Thrushwood and Ashland Terrace. Again, to the west of this side is in Red Bank. The C2 at Thrushwood Drive and Ashland Terrace was rezoned in 1999 with conditions. The other side of Thrushwood Drive, that was rezoned in 2000 from R1 to C2. But then 2015, across from this property, across Ashland Terrace, that was rezoned from R1 to O1 with conditions. That's an existing house being used as a handyman service. Had a bunch of conditions trying to limit the scale and nuisance of that proposed use. Here's a view of the property is vacant. To the north is single unit and office. To the east is single unit, and to the south is single unit. Here's a view of the site. This is north of the site. And second home to the right by the power pole, that's the O1 zone that's being used as a contractor's office. This is east of the site, west of the site. This is looking at Ashland Terrace towards Red Bank. Now, this property is in the Hickson North River Plan, which was adopted in 2005. The plan recommendation from 2005 was medium density residential, which is primarily single family, detached, townhomes and patio homes. It doesn't mention commercial as a use or a zone at this location. Here again is a closer view of the place type or plan recommendation, which is medium density residential. You can see to the east of the site where those existing C2 zones are, I mentioned a few minutes ago. That's the last place the plan recommends the extension of medium business mix. The request is not compatible with the Hickson North River Plan. It is not compatible with surrounding land uses or development form. The area does have some small scale office uses with conditions that limit the uses and nuisances in the area. C2 zone and the uses in that zone would introduce incompatible uses in a development form in the area. This would be considered a spot zoning, as it would create a new zone further away from the existing commercial zone at Thrushwood Drive. So staff recommends to deny this request.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Mr. Lehman?
Just one question. And I know that the plan was in 2005, and I guess my only question would because Ashland Terrace was probably a 2-lane road in 2005. I can't remember when it was changed to a 5-lane section, but is that just from a plan perspective recommendation? Is that and I know that we always look back at plans, and I know that the RPA is doing a whole lot right now to get plans that are much more relevant. But the only reason, and I'm not saying that this C2 zone is necessarily appropriate, but I do believe a transition from a 5-lane section would not necessarily be an R1.
Yeah, and I believe you're correct. I think the plan was done before the widening from 2 lanes to 5 lanes. Again, we don't have the luxury of hearing public comments during our view, and we was taking a conservative approach. Let the policy, if you guys as a planning commission want to set new policy until we have a new plan in place, this will be the venue for that.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? All right, we'll hear from the applicant, Mr. Kessel.
My name is Mark Kessel. I was looking at this property to potentially put a warehouse in light construction. We assemble cabinets. We don't build cabinets. And just already needed some warehouse space. And this is just great piece of property that felt like that would be perfect use for that. We could access from Knollwood instead of having to come off of Ashland Terrace, which would help with some of that traffic. But our first time trying to rezone property, so I don't know what else I need to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you're here in opposition, you wish to speak, please come on up.
My name is Wayne Bratcher, and my address is 3745 Thrushwood. I own the property, I guess, to the east and back behind it too. And my main concern is the water runoff and also that property had been backfilled when Ashland Terrace was done. So that's my main concerns on that is the water runoff, because everything comes down through our property.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak in opposition? I saw a couple hands go up earlier. Okay. Mr. Kessel, come on back up. Are there any questions for the applicant? Is it the, can you go back to the area map or that? Yep. Do you have a copy of the site plan? So Mr. Kessel, do you own the piece of property that touches the other road besides Ashland Terrace? Or would you?
There, I don't know exactly where my property ends. I haven't had it surveyed.
Oh, I guess is that right away right there?
I
Is
think
he
it's
drawing
right
the driveway across right away or another piece of property? I guess that's right away.
It looks like right away, I believe, off of that road to the west. I'm not sure what that's called, northwest. Let me go back to the.
And then did you have the parking lot coming in onto Ashland Terrace?
Had the parking lot coming in off of Knollwood if it were approved, so that wouldn't have to access Ashland Terrace.
He's coming in.
Yeah, that's what it looked like.
Well, there's I gave a future plan would be to do a showroom on the other end, and that would have parking on that end.
Okay.
That's just a potential future development.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Matthews.
I'm a little bit torn with this one. It does seem that it would be spot zoning, but there's a good point was made as far as the width of that road. And also they redid Knollwood. I guess it was Red Bank that completely redid the entrance to Knollwood, which made that much nicer too. I'm inclined to go on with this. So I'm going to move to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Mr. Payne has been seconded.
Do you want to limit it in any way? Because if you go straight C2,
Can we limit to that use only? Right.
Sure. It's what the applicant said it was.
Where? Well, wonder, Mr. Payne, I share your concern in regards to C2. I mean, we can understand what it is you're wanting to do here. The struggle is when we end up in this position at least once a month where staff is recommended to deny. Planning Commission seems like there's consensus that there would be a recommendation to approve. The issue is that C2, without any conditions at all, could be problematic both now and in the future. And while we're looking at your plan and it seems reasonable, this is the time and place for conditions that would address where you come and go from the property, which way the lighting is directed, where a sign is located, all of those sorts of things that could create nuisances for Ashland Terrace or adjacent property owners. and we don't have any of that. If Planning Commission elected to defer this for 30 days, would it be possible, Mr. Schultz, for staff to recommend some conditions to address some of the concerns that might be present if the property were rezoned to C2?
Yes, we can come up with a list of conditions and working with the applicant to see if those are acceptable. Instead of doing on the fly here, makes it a little difficult.
I withdraw my motion.
Would you be open to a 30-day deferral? Okay, we have a motion to defer for 30 days and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next case on the agenda is case 2023-0148, and this is located at 614 Eli Road. And it's a special permit for residential plan unit development. Staff is recommended to deny. Is there any opposition present? And is the applicant present?
We did receive some emails in opposition as well.
Thank you. Mr. Schultz.
Yes, this is 2023-148. This is not a rezoning request. This is a request for special exceptions permit for a PUD for proposed single unit residential and townhouses. The acres of this property is 5.9. The number of units proposed is 29. That's a density of 4.9 dwelling units per acre. And looking at the zoning map, you have R1 to the north, south, east, and west. Further south, you do see along Narrows Way, RTZ. That was rezoned in 2003. There is no zoning history for this particular piece of property. It is a vacant piece of property. To the north abutting this is single unit residential. To the south is single unit residential, as well as to the east and to the west. Northwest, you do have institutional uses, but there are no townhomes in this general vicinity. There are a little bit of steep slopes on the property. It looks like there's some type of drainage ditch in the middle of this property. You'll see in a minute, I think, why that comes into play. That drainage ditch or whatever that is. There's a view of the site. Another view of the site. This is north of the site, single unit residential. South of the site, again, more single unit residential. Site's just on the right hand side. West of the site. This property is in the Hickson North River Plan, again, adopted in 2005. That plan recommendation is low density residential, which is primarily single unit detached. It does allow townhomes and patio homes if the density is compatible. Closer view of that plan recommendation, again, is low density residential. Again, the PUD is a tool that is compatible with the Hickson North River Plan. It is compatible with surrounding land use and development form. However, the proposed design is not compatible with the surrounding uses, density, and form of the area. While the plan does support a mixture of housing, the proposed attached housing along Eli Road would introduce a new form to the area with inappropriate massing and large paved areas. There were two PUD plans submitted with the application. I'll show you those in a second. Staff was more supportive of the first version that was submitted, which is all residential, single family detached. Staff recommended to deny this application. This is the first PUD plan that was submitted with the application. You can see in the middle, I believe that's a creek that separates the two from connecting. To the west was single unit detached, and to the east of that creek is single unit detached. The proposal at that time was 23 dwelling units with a density of 3.89 dwelling units per acre. The revised PUD plan that was submitted now switches the property on the left-hand side along Eli Road to townhomes, and the area on the right remaining single-family detached. The number of dwelling units goes up from 23 to 29, as well as the density from 3.89 to 4.9 dwelling units per acre. Again, it's more of a design function. Staff recommends to deny this request.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? Mr. Chambers.
Sure. Rocky Chambers, Chattanooga Engineering Group at 400 East Main Street. Thanks, Brian. I think that was a great summary. Talk a little bit about why we had two different plans. One of those was we looked at what's around us and came up with the single family plan that you had up there at first. And then in discussions with the councilwoman in that district, she was just discussing, hey, it'd be great if we had different product mixes on site as well. So went back and looked to see if we could fit it in there. and wanted to see where it would make sense on the property to try and fit in a different product type. As most people know here, if we can diversify the product type a little bit, it makes for a more vibrant community long term. So we took it upon ourselves to put townhouses on the part that front Eli Road. Ryan, can you go back to the zoning map for us? And we chose Eli Road. You'll see that we also abut a neighborhood to the north of us. That's fairly low density. It's a very scenic cul-de-sac, nice quiet cul-de-sac off to the front. We didn't want to introduce a form next to it that just would disrupt or change that product type there. So we chose Eli Road as a place to explore the idea of getting different product mixed there. And you notice that we do have other higher intensive uses along Eli Road, just 300 feet to the south of us. We have R4, RT1, RTZ just to the south of us. So when we looked at it, we came up with a little different interpretation on what form fit where, and we looked at the townhouses along Eli Road as kind of conforming with the stuff just to the south of us. Brian also mentioned that we do have that area we actually had a water risk assessment done, so it's actually a creek that runs through the property, and we're staying away from it and maintaining the buffers away from that stream as well, which is why we end up having those two separate entrances. Also, there was a further discussion about, it'd be great if we had at least pedestrian connectivity between the two separate departments, and we're okay with that, trying to get a pedestrian access across that stream. Trying to do that's a lot easier than trying to get a big road across that creek, and less intrusive in the natural resources as well. So we're working on a plan to keep that pedestrian connectivity as well.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? All right, we'll hear from those that are here in opposition, and you'll have the opportunity to respond. If you're here and you're in opposition, you wish to speak, please come on up to the mic.
Good afternoon. My name's Fred Agee. I live in 624 Glen Court, one of the cul-de-sacs that is in the plan of the now standing neighborhood. I just have two issues. One is we did not want to connect with his neighborhood because we just got, well, not just got, but we have installed our speed humps because we are a shortcut between Ashland Terrace and Eli Road. And both of those guys have really built up in traffic, and we're still feeling the heat from that. Also in the 70s, Brentwood Park attached to us, so they drive through us. So what we're trying to do is the speed bumps have helped us, calmed us down a little bit where we can walk our dogs now, ride our bicycles now. But we even now see some of the traffic starting to build back up on the straightaways in our subdivision at a high rate of speed. And we'd like to not have to deal with someone else's cars and vehicles with that. Also, the pond that they are going to build for the runoff is sitting right beside my house. And I have issue with that. I don't want a pond sitting right beside my house. When I bought the house, I bought it to retire. It has a small yard, it's 1,800 square feet. My wife loves it. I love it. Grandkids love it. We just don't want a pond sitting right beside our home. And if you have to follow through with that, could you build a privacy fence the length of the property to keep us from having to deal with the pond and the yard that goes with it? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is James Graham. I live next to the property that's in question. I've lived there for over 50 years, raised my family, grandchildren, enjoyed the property. My concern is not my concern is the condos. I don't have any concern with the houses being built, but I do have some serious concern about condos, because when I step out of my house and look out my door there, I don't want to see high-rise condos look at. So I hope that you could seriously consider my request And hopefully that you will build houses, not condos, for families. This area has always been family oriented. People raise their families there. There's no condos around them. So I hope you give my request serious consideration that there be no condos built on this property. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Also, my other concern is, are there restrictions on how many houses can be built per acre? I don't know what it is, but
there are, and that's
but my concern is that. But my primary concern is those condos.
yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kelsey Harkey. I also live in a home that is adjacent to this property. Similar to their concerns and staff concerns is I've only lived on the street for about 6 months now, unlike Galen that's been there for almost 50 years. And even that short period of time, just that road is already so busy. And I've had to spend honestly thousands of dollars putting in a driveway just to hopefully save my life, pulling out onto Eli from my street or from my house. And there is a very big concern of having, again, specifically with those townhomes, having, I believe it's 17 new units on that road going onto Eli on a already very narrow road with people speeding by. There's a radar on that street, and we've seen people go as fast as 62 miles an hour. I believe the speed limit is 20. And so there's just a lot of concern that I'm sure is being thought about in some ways, but just really just want to consider like having that many more units in that specific parcel on that west side is really concerning. And just other concerns, just like the lack of ability for like pedestrians and bikers and families to be using those streets. Again, it's a very tight road, it's a very narrow road, and having all of these new families into there is just concerning, envisioning like families trying to have their kids along those streets when there is no sidewalks right now. And I'm not sure if the conditions of this unit have sidewalks or anything to like help with that. But it is a big concern for me too.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Derek Hensley. I own a house on Eli Road that's adjacent to this property. I will echo what they have already said. Traffic is a bear on Eli. Adding townhouses, adding all that is not going to help. I also dislike the ponds, the water. It's having that creek there, that waterway is already a bug problem. Having standing water makes it worse. So I would not like to see that as well. So that's my main issue. The standing water and the townhomes, it's adding, you're compounding the problem instead of helping it. So that's that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chambers.
I hear a lot of what the opposition has to say there. And I think there's a couple of things that we can do to help. Normally when we are doing townhouse only developments, we'd be looking like an RTZ, RT1 rezoning. Here it's part of a larger PUD. If we went to that other, townhouse type zoning, normally there's a landscaping buffer requirement between the two different types of uses here. So we'd be okay with a condition of a 10-foot landscaping buffer between the townhouse section and the adjacent properties with an evergreen screen. I think that makes a lot of sense with their concerns there. They also mentioned the ponds a couple of times, and note that we're showing those blue here just to represent the location of those, but our intent is that they would be dry. They'd be dry after 48 to 72 hours after a rain event, so we wouldn't actually be holding water in those.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
A question for staff. Mr. Bird, off the top of your head, you mentioned a 10-foot landscape buffer. What would be the language that y'all would normally use for something like that? Would it be a 10-foot type A, B, C?
Maybe the type C.
Type C.
Landscape ordinance. That's 10. I think it's 10 foot. whatever that language is, be what we'd use. It's similar language that codes enforcement's used to.
And then if I may also kind of address those traffic concerns, I was getting kind of mixed signals from the opposition, whether it's speed or congestion that is the issue. My experience is that if speed is the issue, adding more houses will actually reduce that speeding problem and give you more neighbors. You'll have 17 new neighbors to go to your city council person to say, we need more solutions on Eli Road. So just to address that, and then one last question for the applicant. This plan shows sidewalks on your new cul-de-sacs, but there's no sidewalk on Eli Road. Is that, could you walk me through that, why that sidewalk doesn't extend the length of the property?
We haven't gone through permitting yet, and we'll leave that up to Transportation Department, whether they want additional sidewalks on Eli Road or not. We're okay either way.
I'm prepared to make a motion if there's no other comments.
Are there any other comments or questions? Mr. Byrd?
Move to approve with the condition of a 10-foot type C landscape buffer between townhouse uses and adjacent R1 properties.
We have a motion to approve with conditions, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next case on the agenda, item 10, case 2023-0149, is located at 7731 Hickson Pike. And it's an application to rezone from A1 and R2A Rural Residential District to M3 Warehouse and Wholesale District. Staff is recommended to deny the applicant's request. Is there any opposition present? All right. And the applicant's present. Mr. Schultz.
This is case 2023-149. This is a request from rezone a portion of the property from A1 and R2A Rural Residential District to M3 for self-storage facility. Number of acres in this request is 3.1. It's part of a much larger. It also includes the M3 to the south of this site. Looking at the zoning map, there is A1 to the northeast and R2A. To the south of this site is M3, and to the west is A1 and R2A. There is some zoning history on this property. In 2021, the entirety of this property, there was a request to rezone the entire property from A1 and R2A to M3 with conditions. The request was denied at Planning Commission. Planning Commission and staff recommended to rezone only a portion of the site, which you're seeing on the screen, to M3 with 3 conditions. A minimum 40-foot setback from the western right-of-way of Hickson Pike. The setback does not apply to signage. Monument sign only with a maximum height of 10 foot above grade, and monument sign to be internally illuminated. I believe at that discussion at that point, it was going to be an indoor office or warehousing for prosthetics and not self-storage. It's currently wooded. You have a single unit to the north, single unit to the northeast, single unit residential to the west, and storage unit to the south at the intersection of Hideaway Lane and Hickson Pike. Here's a view of the site. Another view of the site. This is north of the site, single unit residential. This is south of the site where you have some of that along Hideaway Lane where you have some existing storage. East of the site along Hickson Pike. Another view along Hickson Pike, some of the single family detached dwellings. There are nuisance concerns with expanding M3 district to the north, adjacent to the existing single-family residential subdivision. The A1 district portion of this site should remain in place to act as a buffer between the M3 and the existing single-unit neighborhood to the north of this site. There is no adopted land use plan to provide guidance on the expansion of manufacturing districts in this area, so staff recommended to deny this request for the expansion of M3.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff? Mr. Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Schultz, can you remind me at least what R2A is and what's allowed in there?
R2A is single family detached, and it does allow duplexes by special permit.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Steve Hunt with Hunt Commercial Real Estate. My address is 832 Georgia Avenue. Just as staff was reading the presentation, the sellers, the current owners of the property, had indicated they had not pursued a M3 zoning in the back previously, and so it was not denied in the back as in conflict with what Mr. Schultz had said. So I want to get that out there for the record just in case, because that seems like a pretty big swing. I'm sure that's in the history. I didn't count commissioners well enough, but I have some information for all the two of them. We had noticed this site for sale on Hickson Pike, the heavily traversed commercial corridor up through there, and the changes that are going in and around the neighborhood. So we believe in support of all the changes and the increasing growth in that area, that self-storage facility would be appropriate in this area. When we originally talked with the sellers, they suggested the M3 zoning in the back to facilitate our desires. And so we pursued that with them. They suggested that the neighbors were not in opposition to it, that there had been conversation about it a couple of years ago. We proceeded with that knowledge. And then about 10 days, I guess the week before Labor Day, so week before last, we learned that we should notify all the neighbors. So we put a sign on above the yellow placard that has my personal cell phone number on it. And then I hand delivered 20 of the letters that you see here to all the neighbors, and met a delightful couple that are here tonight, the Hatfields, when we talked for a long time about what our intentions were there. I don't know if the folks here are in opposition or if they have questions about what we do. So if I may, I would just continue along the brief comments of what we intend to do and why. So as you can see on the site plan that we submitted with the rezoning, the front portion already being M3, we will develop this in phases to have climate controlled and non-climate controlled on the site. We don't want to do manufacturing. We don't want to do the other uses that are allowed in the M3 zone. We want to do climate controlled and non-climate controlled self-storage. My partner, who owns several of these facilities around the region, is also a Chattanooga native like myself. And he likes to say that it's a quiet use, that the box in one unit doesn't argue with the box in the other unit. So it's a very quiet use, that it's low traffic, that once it's built and occupied, that a similar facility of his on Highway 58 has about 6 to 8 visits a day. So it could be a lot different under an alternative M3 zone. Self-storage won't burden the school system. It won't burden the sewer system up through there. And we're committed to be good neighbors with dark sky lighting policy, focusing lights inward and downward and on motion sensors, so they're only used when necessary. That we also believe that security, it would be of utmost concern for our customers and for the neighbors. So we would have motion access control gates and motion sensors and internet connected cameras in there. Again, in closing, I'll just tell you that we live here and we'd like to be good neighbors and want to do a development that we'd be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Any questions? All right, we'll hear from your neighbors and then you'll have the opportunity to respond. If you're here and you'd like to speak, please come on up.
Hello, my name is Pat Gross. My property butts this property that he's wanting to rezone. And I do have a few questions for Mr. Hunt, which he did not find necessary to introduce himself to me, because that is my property that is coming up against his. In this letter that he did not bring to me, he says this property is unbuildable. Okay, if that property is unbuildable, What does that mean? Does it mean he's going to raise the ground 5 to 6 feet? Does that mean he's going to run water over on my property and flood me like my neighbor on the opposite side of the cul-de-sac did? Another thing, this road, the Highway Lane we live on, is private. For 57 plus years, we have tried to get the county to take this road. They refused. We widened it. We did everything they asked us to do from way back. Now we're having to worry about this road's going to get washed out. All the people that live on that road are retired, disabled, and we are the ones that had to shovel the gravel. And now we're financially going to have to find people and are finding people to work the road. Okay, there's no way that he will not flood this road. It's impossible not to flood this road. Another thing that my concern is a buffer. What is a buffer? A buffer that was passed for my property on the backside, because I own this whole cul-de-sac, 5+ acres, was allowed to plant cane. Do any of y'all know what cane does to your property? That is another battle I'm having. And I have no help. My husband's disabled. Our neighbors are disabled. Another thing, I rode down the road in 1.5 mile circle. Do you know how many storage units there is? In 1.5 miles from Burt's Chapel to Hideaway Lane, there's 4. From Hideaway Lane to Dallas Bay, there is 4. From Middle Valley Road coming into Hickson Pike, there's a brand new one. There's one that's diagonally across from where Hideaway Lane is that was just purchased in the last, I think, year and a half, $13 million. That man's building one heck of a storage unit for boats, RVs. None of these units are full. There's none of them full. So why do we keep having units going up, destroying our neighborhoods? I'm just real upset that it seems like neighborhoods don't count anymore. They don't count anymore. And he says he lives in the neighborhood. I think you live over on Mount Creek Road. Build it in your neighborhood. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be ugly. I respect each one of y'all, but put yourself in our position. We're tired of fighting. We was here 2 years ago fighting, and now we're fighting again. Does it ever stop? And are we wasting taxpayers' money by showing up down here every 2 years? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Cassie, there's 5 minutes remaining. Thank you.
I'm Angie Hickson. This is my husband, Mark Hickson. We live across the street from this. We never got notification that this was happening. Also, I don't know, how many of you live in Hickson, on Hickson Pike? Any of you live in Hickson? Let me explain what it's like over there. It's a concrete labyrinth. There is one project after another being built on Hickson Pike. And within a 5 mile stretch, there are 13 storage units, 13. Traffic is already bad. We have pictures here.
We're really
This is going to be a nuisance.
We're really the last section of residential on Hickson Pike. And you guys probably don't know that there's even a section like that. But there is a good section, which we have here, pictures up and down the street of our area. All older folks, some young ones, some young. Behemoth.
It's a nuisance.
Yeah.
It's a lighting nuisance. It's 24 hours. Like we said, there's 13 storage facilities. I don't understand why more. And when you have neighbors that are adjacent and parallel to these facilities, I don't understand why such a large storage facility, 3 stories. And we'll let somebody else. Yeah.
A lot of what I had to say also had to do with the fact that there are so many storage units already around there. So I won't add to that. I just want to say that there's 3.1 acres worth of tree canopy coverage there. According to a UTC published article called GIS Department is mapping the city's future. We've already lost 43% of our canopy since the 1980s, while development has doubled to 134%. One of the 6 fastest warming city in the country. So my concern is definitely the tree canopy loss. I think this would be a great space to be used for green space as opposed to a storage facility. And I think that's all I've got to say after everybody said what they said. So.
Hi, Nick Andrews. I own a house right across the street from this. I'm a father of 2 young boys. They both attend public school. They play in the yard and they sleep right across the street from this. I don't know if you've seen pictures, but it's proposed a 3-story lighted 24-hour storage facility. I realize that this is under the jurisdiction of an unincorporated Hamilton County. I can't choose what to do with the land. However, the Regional Planning Commission did approach all of Hickson and they asked how they could benefit the neighbors. And I don't think number 12 storage facility is not necessarily going to be a benefit to the neighbors. Us being residents, we don't necessarily have a guarantee that this will become a storage facility. 2 years ago, we were up here with Mr. Lenny, I think, who's the current property owner. We were promised a medical storage facility that would, although we were opposed, it was going to have limited effects on the neighborhood. Now we're getting a 24-hour, 3-story storage facility that's going to be in and out. So I think the fear by all the residents is, was recognized here. This is being rezoned again. Hickson doesn't need another storage facility. If you look at my house, there's 2 north and 2 south within 1 mile. So yeah, I am opposed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just learned from the Hicksons that their mailbox is not on the street, it's on their house. And so my bad for distributing the letters up through there. I did put a copy of this letter in Ms. Gross's mailbox and tried to reach her 4 different times from the telephone number that the Hatfields had given me. So I want to tell you that we did deliberately reach out to the neighborhood, and a lot of the issues that are brought up are not accurate. I never said it was unbuildable. We intend to build on it. We will do our dead level best to apply dark sky technology so that the lighting is not bleeding over. It is proven that a self-storage facility is a very low volume traffic user with no other burden on infrastructure. So yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions of the commission.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? Mr. Lau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just looking at the site plan, the section that the 3-story climate controlled self-storage building is proposed to go on, that's already zoned M3. Is that correct?
It is, Mr. Lau.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Schultz, is M3 the only zone that allows for climate control?
Yeah, this is in the county.
Controlled self-storage.
Some of the commercial zones is not very specific on many warehouses and storage. You can do it, I believe, in C2. It's one of the zones that does permit it. But typically M3 is in the county is the zone that allows the warehousing, mini storage.
So was that a yes? Sorry.
Yes.
I got stuck in some of the details.
C3 specifically, I can't remember off the top of my head. C3 and C5 specifically prohibit mini warehouses.
Gotcha.
In the zoning code of the county, it doesn't specifically call out warehousing or storage.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mr. Chairman. I apologize for interrupting. I failed to point out on another concern about buffers around the development. We got our preliminary site plan to staff that shows a 30-foot buffer around the property to the abutting the residential. My understanding is the requisite buffer is 25 feet. So we would intend to not disturb the existing heavy vegetation around the perimeter of the property and add to the requisite buffer.
Thank you. Mr. Holland?
Yeah, Mr. Hunt, it does seem like a little bit of zoning creep when it was rezoned, and then you want to kind of continue that back. So if denied, do you have plans for the front part, Jason Hickson Pike?
We are under contract to purchase this. We were not involved in the previous zoning, did not know it was M3. We're quite surprised when we found it, and delightfully surprised that we could do the self-storage on the M3 portion. We believe it is a natural progression of that creek maybe, but also it protects the area from a very dense development that would also contribute to other runoff and traffic issues. So we were not involved in the previous one, and we do intend to develop self-storage on the front if our contract to purchase is successful.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Mr. Lynn, direct one to staff, because so when we did M3, and I think Mr. Hunt mentioned it, just so I can remember correctly, was that for the sports medicine for
Yes. And I'm just going
warehousing?
from memory. Maybe Cassie, you can correct me. I'm pretty sure the rezoning request was the entire site. We as staff recommended only the portion that the applicant needed, and it was for he made prosthetics, storage.
I didn't remember it until they made that reference. Was it conditioned?
It has conditions, the three on the screen. A minimum 40-foot setback in the western right-of-way of Hickson Pike. Setback does not apply to signage. It's a huge discussion on
So
signage.
there wasn't a usage condition.
So the M3 today, it can be used subject to those conditions for the mini
Well,
warehouses.
and they're not rezoning the front portion as
back
part of this application. So those three conditions hold.
Correct.
Anyway, okay. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, the current owner and the previous zoning applicant is with me today. He's happy to address any concerns or questions you have about the previous process.
Are there any questions for the current owner or previous applicant? Thank you. I don't think there are any.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one comment.
Mr. Matthews.
I know we got people opposing this, and that's well and good, but I do consider if one of the developers that was here earlier, if they came in for a PUD or a housing development there, where they may have 200 houses, and then there's where your traffic comes from. Which would you rather have? We're moving in an area where, development's coming. So it's almost which would you rather have? That's just my comment.
Mr. Chair, since it was mentioned, I guess the history of this M3, which was achieved a couple of years ago, according to this write-up, what was the intent then?
I have to defer.
Lenny Furr, I'm actually one of the original purchasers of it. The intent was for a warehouse for medical equipment. And unfortunately with COVID, my budget went way out of whack, so I couldn't afford it anymore. I still have that warehouse. I just had to move it down the street. So now I have a vacant land sitting there. Now I'll go there in 3 to 4 years if I have to and build there again, and I'll build a big facility. That's my plan. That's my only alternative. I don't have a choice because I'll own that piece of property. I, like them, live in Hickson. I'm like him. I drive by it every single day. The traffic, I'm very familiar with it. That's exactly why I want something like this there, because the traffic won't be a lot. It's a lot less with that on there. It's actually going to be less traffic if they go on this piece of property than if I go on this piece of property. I have 30 employees now, so it's only growing, and I plan to grow. So I'll have more people coming in and out over there as it stands now, zone. So my thought was this makes the most sense as far as traffic is concerned.
Thank you. What's the will of the commission? No, it will be heard before city council either way. So, I'm sorry, county commission. So you'll have the opportunity to speak at county commission. But deliberation is only for the commissioners at this point. That's right. No, you can't make any more comments. Thank you. I'm sorry. Yes. Mr. Johnson. Second. So we have a motion to deny and it has been seconded. Any discussion? Mr. Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm inclined to go along with the motion that the commissioner just made. I would like to commend the applicant though for taking steps to try to make it easier on the residents and the efforts made to contact them. I think it's notable. So just wanted to pass that along. Thank you.
So we have a motion to deny and it has been properly seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next case on the agenda is item 11. It's case 2023-0151. It's located at 809 Dodds Avenue. And it's an application to rezone from R2 and C2 to UGC. And staff is recommended to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? And are you familiar with the staff's recommendation in regards to conditions? We have a motion to approve with conditions, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 12 on our agenda has been withdrawn. Item 13 is a mandatory referral, 2023-0153. And it's located in the 2200 block of Rossville Boulevard, and it's an application for a right-of-way abandonment. It has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is item 14. It's located at 2023-0154. I'm sorry. Item 14, the case number is 2023-0154. It's located at 8319 Roy Lane and has a staff recommendation to deny. Is there any opposition present? And is the applicant present? Mr. Schultz?
Yes, this is 2023-154. This request is to amend condition number 1 from resolution 822-52B. That condition was a maximum density of 4 dwelling units per acre. Proposed use is single unit residential. The number of acres of this property is 12.38. Number of proposed units is 61. That's a density of 4.96. You can see on the zoning map, it's already zoned R1. It already received a special permit for a PUD. When they came in last year for rezoning, there was a condition of 4 dwelling units per acre. At the time the application was made, it was using, I think, a tax record. It had 15.2 acres. And that was what the condition was based on. 4 dwelling units per acre is actually less. The number of acres is actually 12. So when the plat came in, it exceeded that number of units and density. So that's why we're here, the applicant's in front of you, to lift the condition or amend the condition. This is a vacant piece of property. It actually has a single family dwelling on it. To the north is single unit residential. To the south is single unit residential. And to the west, of course, is vacant property. Just a review of some of the adjacent densities nearby. To the north is Savannah Cove. Abutting this property, it's 3 dwelling units per acre. Further north, beyond Savannah Cove, is 2.9 dwelling units per acre. To the south is the Books property. That's 1 dwelling unit per acre. Then further south across Roy Lane, that's the farm at Hampton Meadows. That density is roughly 2 dwelling units per acre. There is a floodplain on this property to the west along Savannah Creek. There's a view of the site. Another view of the site. This is Roy Lane. This is north of the site, south of the site, east of the site. This property is in the Wolf Dipper Creek land use plan. There was mentioned earlier about this being in a transitional zone. It's actually in the low intensity residential land use category. And that category describes single unit residential detached with a density of 3 dwelling units per acre being the land use category. Densities in excess of 3 should be considered if the development preserves substantial areas of usable open space. Well, the plan doesn't state what that substantial amount of open space should be. It doesn't give a percentage. Here's a closer view of that property. You can see on the left-hand side, it is circled low intensity residential. That plan again was adopted in 2007. The request is not compatible with the Creek plan goals and recommended a density of 3 dwelling units per acre. Staff originally recommended last year a condition related to the rezoning case to limit density to 3 dwelling units per acre in 2022. The increase in density to 4 dwelling units per acre was graded through the Planning Commission as well as the County Commission. So staff recommends to deny based on the plan goals of the adopted plan.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff? Yes, sir.
Mr. Schultz, the current conditions on it that are on there currently, is it 4 dwelling units per acre?
That is correct.
And can you tell me when that was?
2022. And then when the application was made, here's the previous site plan that was submitted with the rezoning request. It showed a total area of the rezoning of 15.49. That's 60, I think it was 62 units. That density equaled 4 dwelling units per acre. They did, since that plan was approved and zoning was approved, they did a survey. Survey was complete on the property. The actual acres is a little less than 15, it's 12. And so the proposed number of units exceeds 4 dwelling units per acre based on the actual acreage that's submitted on the property.
And the applicant's asking for 4.9.
4.9 to do 61 units.
That's all I got. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? And since we're going to hear these both at the same time, we'll take separate actions. But case 0154 is to amend the condition, which is amending it from 4 units per acre to 4.9.
Correct.
The second one is just to update the PUD. So if we can hear both of these together, correct, Mr. Schultz?
You can.
If the amendment's denied, the PUD should be denied.
Right. On the screen here, real quick, give you a sample. This is for the PUD. In 2022, the PUD acres was 15.49, 62 units. That's a density of 4. I also showed 3 community lots of the density or number of acres of 3.97. Today in 2023, the actual acres of this site is actually 12.38. Proposing 61 units, that's a density of 4.92, keeping the same number of lots, which is 3, but the acres of those community lots went down from 2.97 to 1.86.
So again, a denial will allow the 22 PUD on both of these. I mean, it'll
Correct.
fall back to that.
It'll fall back to
Thank
that.
you. Any other questions for staff? If you'll come forward as the applicant, if you give your name and address, you've got 7 minutes.
Bill McCoy, 9667 Collier Place. We're not asking for any more lots than we had before. The way that we actually approached that last time is we were coming into townhomes. They didn't want us to do that. So we went ahead and revised it before we ever came. When we came in at 62 lots with a maximum density, we could have 75 lots. And so they said, would you be willing to cap at 62 lots? And then we came up, that's 4 units per acre on density. That's the way we actually came up with the 62 lots, the 4 units per acre, not asking for any more lots, but we were going off of the property card that is on GIS and everything because we couldn't get a surveyor out in time to get the full boundary survey before we got everything in anyway. We usually never do. And usually when we go off of that, it's within a few tenths. I mean, it's not 3 acres off. It's usually a quarter of an acre or half acre off when we get our boundary surveys back or something. So we're not asking for any more. We're just asking for that density. I mean, we're always asking for affordable housing and everything, but yeah, our density is 5. We're still under the 5. But what we're paying for property now, we can't keep trying to hold everybody to 2 or 3 units per acre, but we can't get it. You're talking about people going to pay another $50,000 or $60,000 per house just to be able to get the lots to fit the property. And I mean, we need 62 lots. Actually, we're down to 61 lots is what we went down to on our new drawing. Is that right, Brian? 61.
That's correct, 61 lots.
Yeah. We've already done the traffic study. We've got all that out of the way.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
I do.
Yes, sir.
Mr. McCoy? So right now you've got 61 lots.
Yes, sir.
No. If this was denied, you still have 61 lots.
No.
No. Do you have any idea how many lots you'll have?
50, you got it on there. Right.
I don't, it's a lot, it's less.
Yeah.
It'd be 12 times
I get 49.
49, 48.
And a half lot, so
4.38,
49.
It's still held to the condition of 4 times the 12, you're looking at 48.
49.52. Round up, that's 50 lots.
I'll just say, my opinion, it's not really a question, is that 4 dwelling units per acre is significantly more than what we're seeing in the neighborhood, the neighboring subdivisions.
Most of those subdivisions around that, with the exclusion of the one that's next to it, is older. And the one that's next to it was actually started out with larger lots because he wanted to do high-end homes. But the market at that time wasn't supporting, I know I was involved in the community, wasn't supporting the high-end homes. So he reduced it, and which he could have went down more and tried to get more density, but he was already approved or something, and he just rode right on with it. But most of the other communities that are the lower density around that are older communities. I mean, the governing body is the one that raised our density from 3 to 5 units per acre just recently. And then we always want to go back and limit on all of our lots on every piece of property we buy. It's 5 acres a unit is what or the governing body raised it to. Then every time we bring
Okay,
a piece
Mr.
of
McQueen,
property.
let me make sure there aren't any more questions for staff or for you. Any more questions? Okay, and you've got a 2-minute rebuttal. Ma'am, if you want to come forward, and if there's any other individuals who'd like to speak. Ma'am, you got 9 minutes.
Kim Helton, 8618 Snow Hill Road. The zoning allows 5 per acre, but the plan does not. And there have been developments around that area that have been limited to 3 per acre because of the Wolf-Teever plan. So the Wolf-Teever plan says 3 per acre for that area. I have some comments from some people that were here and had to leave, and more comments from other residents of the adjacent neighborhood. First of all, the Wolf-Teever Creek plan was adopted by the county commission. The Tennessee code says once it's adopted, it's a legal document, and you must be consistent with the Wolf-Teever plan. The Wolf-Teever plan says 3 per acre for this area, low intensity residential. The Wolf-Teever plan also has another section which has growth sectors, and this is the transitional growth sector, both in the Wolf-Teever plan and the comprehensive plan 2030. In that growth sector, it calls for open space subdivision development. In a 2013 staff report of a PUD just right down the road from here, it said that it was in the transitional growth sector and the open space development model should be used. That development model says 30 to 80% open space for that area. So he has less than 30% open space, and part of that open space in that is calculated with the TVA flowage easement, which according to the zoning regulations, it is not allowed to be calculated into the open space plan. So it's less than, I think he has 3.5 acres. So it's even less than that when you take out the flowage easement, which is a big portion of the end of that development. Some of the comments from, I was supposed to read Stephanie and Brett Leginza. I hope I'm saying that right. They said they're opposed because of opposed to this increased density. The commission has a legal obligation per Tennessee state law to follow the Wolf River Plan, which caps density in this area at 3 dwelling units per acre. Please enforce the plan and uphold the law. Other comments are that it was already increased to 4 per acre, which was above what the Wolf River Plan calls for. So it was already increased more than it should have been according to the plan. There's concerns of the traffic in this whole area. There was a fatality on Mountain View Road just last week, and the traffic is just getting really bad and dangerous. This road, Roy Lane, has several 90-degree turns and blind curves and no shoulders. So it's already a bad road. The traffic study said that it would increase to 493 trips per day. Let's see what the other. A lot of families moved out to Ottawa to get away from the congestion, and a lot of out-of-state people migrated here and continue to migrate here for the same reason. We need to keep this area as uncluttered and as natural as possible. This property backs up to Savannah Bay, and it is a concern about the pollutants for this development because of the rain garden, and a rain garden in the BMP says that you have to bypass it in high rain events. So if that has to be bypassed, how is the water going to be treated before it reaches Savannah Bay? There are water problems and issues with the adjacent subdivision. They have problems with their grass swales. The water does not drain out of it. They have problems with the groundwater the water table being at ground level for 6 months or more out of the year. They've had to, out of pocket, install French drains, rock line the ditches, crawl space encapsulations, along with replacement of many trees and shrubs due to root rot. And in the hydrologic report for this development, it did not show the stream, the culverts, the pond or sinkhole that is on that property. It also did not show wetlands, which they should be delineated to see how far they go onto that property. There are also wetlands on the adjacent subdivision next to Roy Lane. And we don't see anywhere in here where there were any samplings or anything done for the wetlands. So everyone in the adjacent subdivision would like for the Wolf River Plan to be followed. And since this is being revisited, they would like to see it capped at 3 per acre, just like the Wolf River Plan dictates. And they would also like to see at least 30% open space as the Wolf River Plan dictates. And they would just like for the Tennessee code to be followed and this plan to be followed. So those are, I think, all of the comments that I needed to make. Sorry, just a moment. That, they would like for another comprehensive traffic study to take into account all the future developments happening around there as well. And so we would like to see you deny this. We're also perplexed as to why the subdivision was deferred and not denied, because it clearly does not follow the subdivision and zoning regulations. So to defer something that doesn't meet those regulations, it just seems like, what's the point? So we don't understand that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Just your name and address. How much time do we have? About 3 minutes.
I'll be very brief.
Yes, sir.
Gary Bowles, Mountain Pass subdivision. Also recommend denial of this. I think this is a case where our builders have gotten a little too aggressive, maybe even gotten a little sloppy. I mean, we're 20% off on the acreage here between how it was approved to begin with and how it's approved now. And I think it's time to send a message to developers to slow down, make sure we know what we're doing, and then also comply with the Wolf River Plan, as she already stated. So I won't spend a lot of time on that. So that's my message. I would recommend denial.
Thank you. Any questions for opposition? Sir, you got 2 minutes. So, you got 2 minutes.
So I would just say that the Wolf Timber plan is over 20 years old, and I think it's in the process of being redone as we speak. And I'm sure that it'll end up being found and agreed that it'll be close to the White Oak Mountain plan, which will be, a high density area. I mean, everybody knows we need homes, and land there's not much of it left. So, I mean, we got to get what we can get as far as the density in them to be able to make them work at the numbers that's there. It's the only way it works to try to get affordable housing.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? Comments, motions?
Mr. Chair, I move to deny.
I have a motion to deny. It has been properly seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Of course, this one will go and the next one will go to county commission, but if someone's ready to make a motion on 2023-0155, that's the, got a motion to deny, has been properly seconded. And again, this is case 2023-0155, same property for the PUD. Motion to deny. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we'll move to item number 16 on the agenda is a mandatory referral, case 2023-0158. It's an unopened 2700 block of Chickamauga Avenue and an unopened 2800 block of Pennsylvania Avenue in the city of Chattanooga. So again, a right-of-way abandonment. The applicant is requiring closure of both. I think the staff recommendation is to allow partial closing, approve the Pennsylvania Avenue, but deny the Chickamauga. Is the applicant here? Okay. Is there any opposition that would like to speak? And I'm assuming you're not okay. You want to hear about both, right? I mean, your client would like to abandon both. Okay. If Mr. Schultz, if you can take us through that.
Mr. Chairman, we did receive an email in support of the closure from the Athertons, who's just to the south of this property. But correct, this is a request to abandon the right-of-way of Pennsylvania Avenue and Chickamauga Avenue. Proposed use is residential and stormwater management facility. You see on the screen where these rights-of-way are being abandoned. Here's a map just showing adjacent property owners. The applicant is Davis, who owns the one highlighted in the blue, as well as the one to the east. To the north, the property is owned by the Zybodes, and to the west is Everhart and Zybode, and to the south along Chickamauga is Atherton. Here's a view of those unopened rights-of-way. It's about 300 feet to the north of Lightfoot Mill Road. To the north is single-unit residential. To the south is single-unit residential. There are some slope topography issues on these two rights-of-way as well as the property, roughly over 26 to 45% slopes in some areas. Here's a view of the site. This is Lightfoot Mill Road at Durand Avenue. Here's the site plan submitted with the application to see those road closures. You see Chickamauga Avenue and Pennsylvania Avenue. It's a portion of both, not the entirety. Here's a site plan of what will be developed on the property. You can see running through Pennsylvania Avenue, the applicant does have some townhome units. And to the south, it will be split with a property owner to the south. And he's showing, I believe that's a greenway connection or sewer connection, stormwater facilities there in the south. Greenway, according to what somebody over here is saying. So staff recommends to deny the closure of the applicant request of Chickamauga Avenue and approve this abandonment of Pennsylvania Avenue. The northern portion of Pennsylvania Avenue right-of-way has topography. That would make a road very difficult to build through there. Staff recommends retain the existing right-of-way at Chickamauga Avenue based on the proposed development and future access between Durand Avenue and Lightfoot Mill Road and Sherman Park. So the staff recommends to deny applicant's request and approve abandonment of 44.84 feet of the Pennsylvania Avenue, just a portion of it. And we have a map of what that looks like. So again, staff recommends denying Chickamauga Avenue, but approve closing Pennsylvania Avenue, a portion of that.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff? Mr. Payne?
To the south of that green box, Mr. Atherton's. Yeah, he would get, ideally he'd get portion or half of that right away.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry. Mr. Shook, can you use the pointer on this to point the properties they're trying to combine? I didn't follow that well.
So that would help there.
It does.
It's the area in blue is what's being combined.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schultz.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, here, come on, you, just sure. Name and address and then.
Tiffany Farley, AD Engineering. The property where the red arrow is pointing is the second property that we want to combine. So closing Pennsylvania will allow those two properties to be combined. However, we also want to work with Mr. Atherton to the south. The owner has spoken to him. They want to, as Brian mentioned, topography is a nightmare on both of these sites. We want to be able to blend the topography across the two sites and lessen that. It ranges anywhere from 25 to 65% within the right of way. I believe that a road connection would be difficult at best. The intersection with Lightfoot Mill and Chickamauga is not a 90-degree intersection. So that also plays into not being able to construct to the road up to Durand. Durand connects to Sherman Reservation Park. And while we respect that, that's why we're allowing a 10-foot pedestrian path easement to be placed on the property going to Durand to facilitate that. The existing right-of-way for Chickamauga is only 40 feet as it stands right now. If it were to be developed, it would require at least a 10 to 20-foot retaining wall on each side of the right-of-way in order to construct that road. I don't think it's in the city's best interest to hold on to it. Like I said, we're granting an easement. When we develop this parcel, depending on how it's ultimately developed, we may realign the pedestrian path to go through our site to give a better experience for pedestrians going up there. There's no sidewalk within probably a mile of this site in any direction. So if you're walking to the park, you're walking in the street. I don't know that all the streets are also 22 to 26 feet either. But that's one of the things that we've conceded to allow that to be closed.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant or staff?
We've also agreed to, I approached Chris Davis earlier before the meeting. I want to work with them between now and city council to see what we can't work out. We did meet with them before we started this process and we showed them the topography. Part of our application showed if you actually constructed the road, what the grades would look like. It's very expansive as to how much would be needed in order to make it work. We'd like to work with the property owner to the south to combine and blend the grades to kind of prevent any erosion or any issues like that. This project will also, you'll get another shot at it because we got to rezone it. So you'll see it again. So, you know, it's not like this is the last time you'll see it.
Thank you. And like all mandatory referrals, and appreciate you mentioned that about CDOT and Public Works, it'll go there and then on to City Council. So questions, Mr. Payne?
We do this and then it doesn't get
Well, I think it doesn't matter. Both the way I understand closures, and Mr. Schultz can correct me, is that what by resolution or ordinance by the city council, once it's approved, it allows surveyors to then allow that property to turn back over to private. So what I'm saying is, would you close it without this development? I think usually I'm not going to speak for the city. Usually the reason why you don't close right of ways, because it's very difficult to ever, to get it back, you're going to be either going through a development or going through a purchase or going through a condemnation. So typically the reason why you would keep right of way from a municipality or county would be that there may be some future use and future access, and it's in the public's best interest to keep it, to allow that. That's why you have use. Sometimes you have use agreements, sometimes you leave them, and there's a whole lot of unopened right of ways throughout the city and county. So I'm not sure that it's contingent. I'm sure her development is contingent, or the development's contingent on the closure, but I'm not sure that if the closure happens, that anything other than it going away in the private property hands would be anything other than what would happen. It may be more appropriate to do them together, but I don't know. There may be some other financial or purchase agreements otherwise. But can you
One of
answer
staff's
that?
comments was the closure will not affect future potential service or access to adjacent properties.
Well,
So if it did get closed.
right. Well, let me ask the question, just because
Sure.
it is interesting that you're going to go for rezoning. Why this out in front? Is it just happens that this was
Viability of the development.
okay?
It's how much room do you have
I
to
got
do
you.
whatever it is you want to
So,
do.
right. So it could have been before. It could have been a
Chicken
case
egg.
before, but I got you. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I don't think it has any.
I've got a question
Aaron?
for the
Yes, sir.
applicant. That 10-foot pedestrian easement you were talking about, is there any document currently that that's tied to, or is that just kind of gentleman's agreement right now?
Right now, it's a gentleman's agreement, but once we replat, we'll have that as part of it. Because when we replat it, what we'll do is we'll have a development plan
Right.
by then, and we'll know where it needs to go.
Would you be opposed to that being, if it's written properly in
As long as we have flexibility to move
Yes.
it and adjust it,
yes.
depending on the development, yes, absolutely.
Well, let me ask the question, because I could see it easily being a condition in a rezoning. Can you condition mandatory referrals? Okay,
We
well,
can.
fair enough.
So I would prefer
learned
to do it
something.
now, because
No,
like you said, we're losing.
I was just making sure
Right
you could
away.
do it. I'm glad you asked that, because I wasn't sure you could do it. So,
I wasn't either.
I'm prepared to make a motion in that case.
Mr. Holland, do you want
Yeah,
to
so
say anything?
that section on Chickamauga Avenue has a couple of parcels that if it's not rezoned, they wouldn't have access, right?
No, nothing's landlocked if they're closed. They're up. Those are internal property loans. That's actually one, the blue is one large parcel, and then we own the parcel that's
My
just
apologies.
below that.
Thank
you.
Okay. Any other questions, Mr. Bird?
Have motion for approval with the condition of a 10-foot pedestrian easement to be dedicated between Chickamauga Avenue and either Lightfoot Mill Road or what is that, New Jersey Avenue. Gives you that whole frontage.
Okay, so that's a motion to approve both closures with the condition of the 10-foot access. Did I hear a second? Can I have a second? Motion and second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We have another one. Mandatory referral. It's item number 17, mandatory referral 2023-0159. It's located at the 1300 to 1400 block of East 39th Street in the city of Chattanooga. It's a mandatory referral for a sewer easement abandonment. Has a staff recommendation to approve. Any opposition? Okay, have a motion to approve. It has been seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 18 is case 2023-0160, located at the 6000 block of Highway 58 in the city of Chattanooga, to rezone from R1 residential zone to C2 convenience commercial zone. Has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition? Is the applicant present? Are you familiar with the condition? Are you? So you're good with the condition? Okay, have a motion to approve with the condition has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 19 on the government mandatory referrals is a case MR 2023-0145 from the city of Chattanooga. It's an unaddressed property in the 1000 block of East 38th Street in the city of Chattanooga. It's a mandatory referral lease agreement, I believe, with an EPA contractor. Any opposition? Okay. Have a motion to approve. It has been seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Under amendments and resolutions, item number 1 is an amendment to the Chattanooga City Code. And don't make me read all that, but it's basically to add a new form-based code context area and associated form-based code zones for West Side and associated zones. I'm assuming you're going to want to take us through this, correct? Or is there any opposition? You're the applicant.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be recusing myself from this case and the following West Side case and moving to the other side of the dais here.
Okay, gotcha. So I looked through this. Do we need a staff? Do we need a?
I think so.
Yeah, let's
I
do
think
the
so.
staff presentation. Yes, sir.
Yes. So we got 2 cases
Oh,
with it.
this is an amendment anyway. We're not to a vote. Thank you.
Yeah. What first case you'll see is amendment to the create the new context area as well as the new zones. Second case is to rezone this property to those new form-based code zones. So the same map covers both cases. The ultimate request is to rezone from R3 residential zone and R4 special zone and C2 convenience commercial zone to a new context called the West Side neighborhood zone form-based code with associated zones. You can see on the screen the area we're talking about. It's a mixed-use development to support the West Side Evolves transformation plan. It's about 53 acres in size, the total development. There's no units listed, so we didn't have a density number for this property. In 2019, to the west of this site, we did create the form-based code amendment for the Bend and associated zones, as well as rezoning. So there's been precedent in the area for creation of form-based code zones. And then to the east of the site, downtown was rezoned to form-based code in 2016. Skip this. Here's a view of the site. I'll go through these. I believe this site's being redeveloped. So these are the current pictures as of today. It's a sign on Boynton Drive, Gateway Avenue, Boynton Drive and Gateway Avenue. That's Popular Street. This is the YFD department building on 12th Street. It's 1200 block of Grove Street. This is the Sheila Jennings West Side Park. It's the Grove Street Market. This is in the West Side Evolves plan that was adopted by City Council in 2022. That plan had a lot of goals, and some of those goals were inclusive housing choices and diverse design options, as well as creating multiple pathways to grow and support local businesses, improve the street network, create spaces that support pedestrian activity and community gathering, nurture a healthier community for all, and finally strengthen physical, cultural, and historic connections. And this is a rendering of what the plan would look like. It also had an economic development community plan, talking about commercial mixed use along West MLK Boulevard, Riverfront Parkway, and West Main Street, including a variety of uses such as neighborhood amenities, social services, retail, restaurant, or small grocery store. And MLK recommended ground floor commercial with small grocery store. It also recommended live work along Grove Street, and as well as small incubators. And this is representation of what that looks like from multifamily to 5-6 stories to 4 stories, townhomes 2 to 3 stories, a community hub, live work, and some other retail establishments. Here's the housing plan that's part of that adopted plan. You can see in here it recommends high density from 5 to 7 stories is the darker bluish purple color. Medium density is the lighter color of 3 to 5 stories. Low density of 2 to 3 stories, and then of course open space. It also in that plan had recommended open space plan, and these are some of the plan recommendations of community garden, multi-use trails and greenways, enhanced streetscape, dog park, James A. Henry Hub. It also had recommendations of connectivity, expanding 12th Street, connect the bend to this property, new street grid connections, Main Street improvements, and walking pathways. So back in 2019, when the bend came in, we didn't have a way or a process to amend the form-based code, so we had to create that process. So in 2019, by Ordinance 13505, City Council adopted an amendment to create for large sites where you could go through a process of creating your own context and your own associated zones. And the bend was one of the first ones to go through that process. It typically applied for redevelopment sites over 40 acres in size. And you had some certain criteria you had to meet. You had to demonstrate how the current form-based code zones do not fulfill your development proposal and how your site was so unique. And you also had to show how your new context and zones fulfill the form-based code purposes. The applicant is limited to certain amendments. You can define your new context area. Proposed form-based code zones, you must use existing form-based code zone templates as your model. You can talk about proposed land use table. You can amend to height and development standards. Certain standards you could not amend, like Division 8 through 13. You could depart from street standards. It did specify you could write your own standards for streets, but everything else in relation to signs, special uses, parking, access, those landscaping, you could not exempt, and signage, you could not exempt yourself from those current standards. Here they are on the site. The definitions, these are Division 8 through 13, you cannot amend. The only exception, again, is off-street parking. So on the screen is the new form-based code context area map. You see where the west side fits into this. It's the bend to the west. To the east, the site will be the downtown core and the urban context core. The new context area will be added to the form-based code document called the west side, which will enlarge the area controlled by the form-based code committee. The applicant has proposed two new zones in this context. There's a WN neighborhood and WPK, which is a park. Going through this review, the applicant is only proposing to rezone one zone. Even though they're creating two zones, the applicant requested only zone the entire site to WN. These new sections will be added to the form-based code. There's also a new map identifying A streets. On the left-hand side, these are some of the lot types that are currently permitted in some of the form-based code commercial zones. The first column is the DCX, and the middle column is the UCX, and the third column is what the applicant's proposing. The area in red is where there's areas of differences. So you can see on the left-hand side, first one you see is single unit attached. Those are permitted lot types in the DCX and UCX. This applicant is not proposing that as a lot type. Multi-unit is the next area of disagreement, if you will, is the UCX permits multi-unit. The WN is also promoting or recommending multi-unit, but it's not allowed in the downtown CX zone. Multi-unit, hybrid, and public commercial are all the same, so there are no differences in those in terms of lot types. Some of the difference in dimensional standards are in building setbacks on B streets. You can see in the DCX, it's currently 0 and 10 is the max. UCX is 0 and 15. The WN is proposing 0 and 20-foot max. Another difference is in the lot frontage or building frontage. It's 90 in the DCX, 80 in UCX, and 60 in the WN. And then finally, in frontage on B streets, it's going from 80 in DCX, 40 in the UCX, and a 30 in the WN zone. So there's minor differences in those regards. The WN is proposing a minimum height of 2 stories. And you can see it's very similar to the DCX and UCX. Actually, those are a little bit more higher, which starts out as 5 and 3. In terms of maximum building height, there's a wide range of maximum building heights in the DCX and UCX zones. For the WN, the applicant is proposing 7 stories and a max of 100 foot in height is the maximum building height in the WN zone. Some differences in setbacks. The only difference here is in the B street setbacks from the DCX zone is 30 foot. UCX is 10, and what the applicant is proposing is 10. So those are very similar. There's a little bit of differences here in fenestration from 20% and 40% in the proposed applicant zone to 30% in the other zones. They're adding in story height, live work ground floor elevations where the other 2 zones don't have that. Clear pedestrian zone In the DCX, that's a minimum of 10 foot and 6 foot along A and B streets. In the UCX, it is 6 foot minimum. The applicant in the WN is proposing 8 foot and 5 foot along A and B streets. And then finally, street furniture zone. The depth is 6 foot in the DCX and UCX zones is both 6, and the applicant is proposing 5 in the WN zone. The park zone, again, is another zone they're creating. It's very similar on the lot types, no differences there. Same thing on development standards. There are no differences between the DCX and UPK zones, the WPK zone. Same in terms of parking setbacks, similar to the zones of the DPK and UPK. Here there is the first time we see a difference in terms of setbacks. Along A and B streets, it's 0. And then on UPK, it's 20 foot minimum. In the WPK, it was not listed in that section, but I think we're handling that through another code amendment. In the clear pedestrian zone, there's some differences here. It's 10 foot minimum in the DPK and 6 foot in the UPK. The proposed WPK zone is 8 foot along A streets and 5 foot along B streets. That's a difference there. And then finally, in street furniture zone, both the DPK and UPK recommend 6 foot depth. The applicant's proposing 5 foot. In terms of uses, there are little differences in some of the uses. Again, I noted earlier, single unit living attached is not recommended in the WN zone, where it is recommended or currently allowed in DCX and UCX. I won't go through all these unless you want me to, but this is some of the uses. It's terminology from permitted to special permit, Board of Appeals. Same thing with the WN zone and park zones, very similar uses. Here's a map of the A streets. Again, I highlighted what's being added as A streets in the purple circles. There's 3 of those. Riverfront Parkway, MLK, and I believe that's 12th Street is being extended as A Street. So based on all that, the proposed context is compatible with adopted West Side Evolves plan with some minor changes to ensure compatibility with dissimilar uses. Staff recommends approval of the West Side context area and zones with some modifications. One of the modifications is that the applicant recommended STVRs as a permitted use. The STVR use does not appear compatible with the West Side Evolves plan goals to provide long-term housing in the area. The applicant did also recommend not complying with parking minimums. They wanted to exempt themselves from the parking requirements. Staff does recommend retaining existing parking minimums within the form-based code to ensure that residents and visitors have adequate parking and access. This context is a little different than downtown, which downtown is exempt from parking. Downtown, you have more shared parking spaces, more on-street parking. So we felt that you should at least still have the parking minimums in this area. And staff recommends increasing the clear pedestrian zone minimums to ensure equitable access, in particular AD access, for all users in this development to match the other zones. So staff, at the end of the day, recommends to remove STVRs as a limited use in the table for the WN zone. Parking minimums shall be required with discounts per existing form-based code. Shared parking is allowed and encouraged. And finally, number 3, the clear pedestrian zone shall be 10 foot minimum for A Street and 6 foot for B streets in the WN and WPK zone. That is just the context and new zones.
Thank you. And
That's a lot.
Let me say this, and hopefully I'm just going to make sure I understand process here, because I know it takes a tremendous amount of work, both probably from the applicant relative to putting together a new context area, and a tremendous amount of working back and forth with RPA staff.
It did, like I mentioned earlier at lunch, I want to congratulate Cassie and Emily, as well as the applicant. They did a really good job. Multiple meetings were held. We have 2 of these on the agenda. There's probably 12 plus hours of staff time reviewing these and working with the applicant, getting to document what you have in front of you today.
So
it's been a long process.
Well, even the spreadsheets probably took quite a bit of delving into the existing zones and the
That's
new
all
zones.
Emily and Cassie.
So let me make sure I understand. So everything that they proposed to some extent has been worked through, and so the document as an amendment to create a new West Side context area as shown comes with a recommendation from staff with these 3 modifications.
Yes, and I believe the applicant can speak for themselves. I believe they wish to talk about number 2 on the parking minimums.
Okay.
There's another what should I say, twist. I don't see Justin Turson. He's with CNE. He, I think, has COVID, tested positive for that. He can't be here today. It's unusual that we have somebody who owns some, who's requesting an amendment to this zone. He would like to request that as part of this new context area, the single unit attached and single unit attached with ADUs be permitted. Applicant for this zone or context did not recommend or did not suggest those as uses, but we have somebody requesting those be added.
Okay, well, and you went through that, I think, at least in your thing. So currently, single family attached and single family detached are not in this current new zone in the context.
Correct.
Okay, and there's a request at least that you got to add those back.
Yes.
And then I did see, just because I was doing it, there's a minimum 2 stories, maximum of 7 stories currently.
On the height, yes.
Yep. Okay. So we will hear, I guess, from the applicant. And then does anybody have any questions for staff? Mr. Payne?
I do. Just the short-term vacation rental, I understand the logic behind not doing it, but is it, and I'm sure they're going to answer this, but would that be something that's part of the financial viability of the project to start with? You know, if there's a limit on it rather than just, you know, I don't want to lose a deal because we didn't allow 10% vacation rentals, you know, or something like that.
I'll let the applicant speak to that. And I failed to mention on the parking minutes, I think Chris is we still have Chris Davis from CDOT here to answer anything on parking minimums.
Okay, if there's any questions for staff related to parking minimums, Mr. Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Schultz, does the staff have an opinion on the recommendation of the single family attached and single family?
We did not look at that at this point because it just came from late last week. Maybe let the applicant speak to that, why they excluded that, and maybe if they want to have those. Ideally, you would have multiple zones like an RD or RA zone instead of all encompassing one zone to include those. But
I think it's CHA who, with the developer submitted this, has no intention to do single family or 2 family or whatever on the site. So they just didn't include it.
And this would not be a zone that'd be likely to be expanded into other
Well,
areas.
I think that's what the intention is. If you added it now, then someone in the future could expand it to their site, which could be adjacent, and add single family, and they'd already be able to do it. I guess that's the intention.
Thank you, Mr. Well, I'm sorry, one more question if I may, Mr. Chairman. And this may be a question for later, but can you give us just a brief idea of what the parking requirements in form-based are? I mean, is it just that
it's
simple
1
of
point,
so
it
many
depends on
parking?
the number of units. It's either 1 to 1.25, depending how many units you have.
One to one for units for up to 3 bedrooms, 1 1/4 parking spaces for units with 4 bedrooms and greater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Ms. Stack can explain why they are proposing no minimum parking.
Okay. Any more questions for staff? Okay. Yes.
Hi.
Just name and address.
Okay. Jessica Stack, address is, office address or home address? Okay. 719 Cherry Street, architect with Tinkerma. And we're the applicant. I want to first say, just echo what Mr. Schultz said and thanking staff for their time in this because it is a huge lift and we appreciate them making themselves available to us. So I'll hit real quickly the single family attached since that was something that was added through this process as a request from an adjacent property owner. Yes, we did not include it initially because we are applying on behalf of CHA and city-owned properties only at this time, and neither the city-owned nor the CHA-owned properties are intended to be used for single-family attached. These would essentially be fee simple townhomes, so that's not the plan for CHA or the city-owned properties. However, it is certainly the goal that this district, and you can see when you look at the outline and how this context area is drawn on the overall map, it's a bit zigzaggy right now, right? The intent would certainly, or the hope is that other adjacent property owners would see value in adding their properties to this zone as well to create a more comprehensive and continuous plan. We've evaluated the idea of adding single family attached, and I don't have any opposition to that. I don't see any unintended consequences of that. Obviously, that's not something that the CHA or city-owned properties would do. But if there were an adjacent landowner who wished to develop townhomes in fee simple, townhomes that would promote home ownership in this district, I quite frankly think that probably would be a good thing. Okay, so on the conditions, I do want to hit these quickly. So the short-term vacation rental, we had in our application suggested that these be a limited use, which is quite frankly just consistent with all other context areas of the form-based code that have residential uses in them. Public housing residents are restricted through their lease. They cannot put their properties up for short-term vacation rentals through their lease agreement. So it's kind of not applicable to the public housing residents. However, again, with the vision that this would be a larger zone that encompasses adjacent private land, privately owned land, we would see no reason that people in this district should not have the same access to those short-term vacation rental permits. And again, that's a process. It's not granting their right to do so, but they would have to get a permit. I don't see why they would be prohibited from doing so. The other one, the parking minimums, this is a couple of elements to this. One is when we look at the market-driven needs for parking ratios for these properties, there's two different product types that are being targeted for the public housing. One is the family housing, and one is senior housing. So family housing, Columbia Residential, someone mentioned earlier, is CHA's elected master developer. They have about 30 years of experience in this specific space, and their experience is that family housing, that 1-to-1 parking unit per residential unit is appropriate. However, in senior housing, which we do have a good bit of and kind of a concentration on the top of the hill, as it's called, Gateway Towers and Dogwood Towers, Riverview and such, that from a market base really only necessitates about a 0.5 parking space per unit. So when we go to do senior housing, and I would just note that Gateway Towers is one of the highest priorities for replacement in this district. So it will be one of the very first properties that we look at creating replacement units for. So we're going to hit this issue early on. Providing higher than needed parking for those units is going to essentially force us to lose residential density on the site in favor of parking, right? That's maybe not needed, or have to be back here for variances along the way. So we would ask that this, similarly to the Bend, be exempt from the parking requirements. Yeah, I think I've got the CHA chief of police pulled some numbers for us on current vehicle ownership. Gateway, it is, excuse me, 0.21 spaces per unit, and College Hill Courts is somewhere between 0.7, 0.8 spaces per unit, current vehicle ownership rates per unit. So the other element to that is the phased approach. This is you've seen the master plan. This is a project that will occur over many years and over many phases. So the other component to this requirement is the difficulty in meeting those exact prescriptive parking requirements at each phase. I can tell you one of the earliest phases that we're looking at putting housing, the way that it fits and the way the master plan shows it, based on how we need to implement a build first strategy, probably only going to be at about 0.9 space per unit for that particular phase. And I'm speaking abstractly because these specific details we don't have plans for this yet. They're still in development. So I foresee challenges with each phase of hitting those prescriptive unit counts for parking along the way. And then the third condition on here, the clear pedestrian zone. I mean, this is really primarily the A Street is being recommended at a clear pedestrian zone of 10 feet versus what we requested is 8 feet, primarily just based on experience of working through these types of projects with these requirements. We often have to ask for variances for these things. I'll just also note here that, MLK and the three A streets are MLK, Main Street, and the 12th Street. And these are 3 existing streets with existing right-of-ways. And so essentially, we're not changing what's there right now, but these would apply to new streets along the way. The only A street would be the extension of 12th Street that's quite a ways down the road.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll let, are there questions? Because I think, not that there's any opposition, but we may let staff talk one more time about, because I think what they're saying, I didn't hear you say you needed STVRs, but you were going to say limited use because everywhere else, there is some concern about the parking minimums that staff may want to respond to. And then, of course, the clear pedestrian zone. But you will go ahead. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a question. Brian, can you go back to the use table? The use table for WM. Let me know when you want to stop. Lodging. Group living. Go forward one. There we go. To answer the question about STVR and also to thank staff, thank you, staff, for including that, because the intention of the council was not for every neighborhood in Chattanooga to have STVRs. In fact, it was the exact opposite of that. The council and the administration of the city have made it clear that STVRs are a commercial use and should be allowed in all zones where hotels are allowed. And in this zone, hotels are not allowed.
Okay.
So the idea that new housing units would come off the assembly line in an area of town where they are sorely needed and go straight into the STVR pipeline.
Yeah, that's certainly not the intention.
Right. And I'm sure it's not, but I think that's what staff is trying to avoid.
Okay.
And I think that's the best condition attached to this. Can you go back one, Brian? I do have a question though. I just curious, single unit living attached is not allowed, but multi-unit living is. This tells me that 5 townhomes attached on 5 lots is not okay, but 5 townhomes attached on 1 lot is. And I'm just trying to understand the difference in those two things.
Sure. And as I mentioned, we're not opposed to the addition of the single family or single unit attached being added to this. It wasn't part of our consideration because it just doesn't apply to the properties that we're applying for right now. But I don't have any problem with adding it.
So you don't foresee an issue going forward
No.
with anything that's planned? Or
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, I think that's a fine addition.
Chairman, I'll have a motion, but I want to give other people a chance to speak.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one point, I think for the folks at home listening or anybody that's wondering about the parking issue. If there is no parking minimum, there will still be parking, correct?
That is absolutely correct. The master plan is designed with, I think, actually slightly greater than a 1-to-1 ratio at completion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. I just, sometimes the language can get a little bit confusing to maybe if folks aren't living this every day.
Thank you.
And then the second question was when we were reviewing those uses on that slide, it looked like, will you go back to the one that had, the lodging, currently so the WN is the one we're adding, correct?
That's correct.
So it does say the way that the slide shows short-term vacation rental still has an L.
If that's the motion of the planning commission, that would come out when it goes to city council.
Understood. Okay.
Yes.
I was getting a little bit confused by that, but sorry, thanks. And I think if Commissioner Anderson's ready to make a motion, I'll get out of the way.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know, if you want Chris to respond to the parking minimums or.
Well, I guess I just have one question because the comment just made. So, and I understand the concern with it being phased because if senior living's first, do you really need a 1-to-1? And so I guess the comment was that probably at the end of the project, full out, you would have a parking minimum requirement, but you wouldn't necessarily in phase 1, 2, or 3. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. We may not necessarily in each phase, it may not be exactly that 1-to-1 in each phase, but it is intended to be approximately that at its completion.
Okay.
Yeah. And the desire here is for it to be more market driven than zoning driven.
Gotcha. And Chris, if you just want to make a comment on that.
Yeah, I just want to just say that we would be glad to work with the applicant with any discounts that they may need or counting some of the on-street parking and that kind of thing. We just don't feel comfortable just completely not having the minimums at all.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
I would just like to go on record with saying I do feel comfortable with that.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move approval with modifications incorporating conditions 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to speak on 2, but incorporating conditions 1, 2, and 3, as well as adding single unit attached housing as a permitted use with a P in that use table that we saw before. As an aside, I hope there is some work between CDOT, the Department of Planning, and the applicant to determine what parking minimums are appropriate before this gets to City Council. I look forward to discussions about that, and that's my motion to approve.
Okay, motion is staff recommendation with the modification and adding single unit attached as a use.
Mr. Chairman, the motioner, is that also adding single unit attached with ADUs?
That's what I was going to ask. I thought that was the request.
There were two, a single unit attached and single unit attached with ADUs.
Yes, please.
Okay, both.
And so your recommendation is to keep condition 1, 2, and 3?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you asking for an evaluation of condition 2? Is that what your point was there?
That was me just telling you we're going to talk about it before it gets to City
Yeah,
Council.
because I mean, I think it is worth sort of just really understanding what the development plan is and what makes sense.
I think a staff conversation between now and then would help, because if this thing gets to City Council with this not fleshed out a little more, it's not going to get decided on the dais that day.
Okay, so I have a motion. Did I get a second? And I have a second to approve the 3 conditions with the additional condition of single unit attached and single unit attached with ADU. Any discussion on the motion? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While I will admit that the enemy of good is perfect and that there's plenty of other opportunities to have the parking conversation, I just think it's a little, I would personally love to see us move beyond parking minimums in general. I think a development ought to have the ability to determine those parking minimums, and we should put the number of units above the number of 9 by 18 parking spaces, especially when it comes to when we're talking about affordable housing and senior housing and housing for the portion of our population below 50% AMI, where ownership of a car might even be questionable. That development is looking at wanting to increase desperately needed units and an antiquated requirement for number of parking spaces could potentially mean the difference between 1, 2, 3. I mean, I do some work with Chattanooga Neighborhood Enterprise, and we have a waiting list that is hundreds of families long. And I just would like to see us as a community start prioritizing people above cars. I won't get in the way of the motion. I will vote approval on it so we can move it to City Council. But I just number 2, I do find problematic. But
Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
May I ask a question? Is that appropriate now?
Matt, I agree with you, and know that there is a much larger, as large as the entire city of Chattanooga, conversation about greatly reducing parking minimums. I just think we're midway through that conversation internally, and just a blanket change like this is probably a little hasty.
I agree.
Okay. Thank you. Both very good comments. Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? And this is for the amendment, approval of the amendment.
That's correct.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And that is with those 4 conditions. So now what do we do, Mr. Schultz? Do we move to this case number?
Yes, you moved to 2023 156B, if you will, which is the actual rezoning of the properties. And in this case, the applicant was requesting a WN zone for everything shown in red. Staff recommends you see the arrow leading over the, I think it's a Sheila Jennings Park. Since that is a new zone created, staff recommended that entirety of that parcel be rezoned to WPK zone as that's being created, with the condition that outdoor recreation use shall prohibit large-scale regional facilities of water parks or stadiums or arenas. That's simply because how outdoor recreation is defined. It includes a large range of what that could be. So staff recommends approval of the WN zone for all these, with the exception of parcel 145 FA4, which is 1195 Grove Street. Staff recommends that be zoned WPK with that one condition.
Okay. And I asked before any opposition, but, and I guess the applicant would want to speak relative to that staff
please.
recommendation. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. This recommendation really, our application to rezone completely to WN for right now is purely logistical. We are in the process, working with CHA and the city and the development team in applying for Choice Neighborhoods grants, which have very defined timelines and deadlines. And I apologize if Brian, I didn't have the specific information available when we last spoke, but the application deadline for this first phase of that grant is December 11th. And part of that application is the requirement for the city to certify that all property is essentially able to be built upon for housing that is shown for housing in the master plan. Right. Okay. Oh, perfect. This is great. So if you look at what's on your screen right now, yes, that Sheila Jennings Park is currently there on that parcel, and it is intended to remain right there. That parcel is broader and encompasses also where Brian's pointing right now, which is that triangle parcel. And that is one of our very first phases of housing. And if we were to right now zone this as WPK, then I would have to immediately turn back around and request to rezone it back to WN in order to get this CNI grant moved forward with that as part of this parcel. The intent here is to, once those boundaries specifically are known and the units are designed and footprints are designed, and we have the exact locations of those roads and the new parcel boundaries, the intent is to rezone that corner that is represented as Sheila Jennings Park there on the master plan to WPK. So that is the intent. It's just that right now, this property is much broader than what it will eventually be as we go through design. So as we narrow down those footprints, those areas that are shown as parks will be rezoned to WPK. That park is already in design. The civil engineering and landscape architecture is done. I believe it's phase 2 of what's being deemed the hub, which is the renovation and expansion of James A. Henry. There's a portion of James A. Henry expansion, which is the community center, which also will get built on part of the property that is currently that Sheila Jennings Park. So that would potentially create an issue for that project moving forward at this stage as well.
Mr. Chairman, staff did look at just rezoning a portion of that site to WPK, but she's right. It's hard to determine where that line is. That's why we just chose to go the entire parcel at this time, because it's not knowing where that boundary line is. It's very difficult.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
But you are committed to basically the gist of what the staff is after. Just it's logistics.
Absolutely.
You're
Yes.
committing right now. There's no water world, water park coming.
No, sir. Okay. No Lake Winnie Part 2 over here. No, the commitment is to implement what's shown in the master plan and what's been adopted by the city. And that includes that corner parcel of Sheila Jennings Park. But logistically, in order to hit our grant funding deadline and move the process of implementation forward, we need this parcel right now to be zoned for WN and then later subdivided and rezoned, which is not quite as beholden to that timeline.
Well, and I guess being a larger parcel, I mean, who owns that parcel now? City
The
of
city
Okay.
of Chattanooga,
So
that's
there's
right.
some controls. there.
Yes, that's right. It's city owned. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions, other questions? Or a motion, correct? So we have a motion to approve this, not the staff's, but the applicant's request for the entire context area to be zoned WN. So I have a motion that has been seconded. Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the next number 2 is, which is 157A and B. I believe the applicant wishes to defer those for 30 days.
The applicant here for, and I guess we'll defer both the amendment, which was a request for the, and that's for the Chestnut Street context area. And then, of course, the rezoning. Is the applicant here?
She's back there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see. I wasn't looking that way. So you would like to request both of those to be deferred 30 days? Okay. Okay. Yeah, let's do them one at a time. So this is the amendment for the new context area, Chestnut Street. I have a motion to defer for 30 days. It has been seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Motion carries. Okay, item B, the case 2023-157 have a motion to defer 30 days. It has been seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3 is an amendment to the Chattanooga City Code in the downtown core to, I'm assuming, modify the DCX zone. Mr. Schultz, if you want to.
Yes, this is an amendment. Last month, we had a couple of individuals here, I believe they're here today, requesting the Planning Commission to direct staff to look at amending the DCX, the downtown core context area, to add additional height. Planning Commission directed staff to come back with an amendment, and that's what we have in front of you today. We looked at adding, the DCX stops at 12 stories. 12 stories is the maximum height. We looked at adding some additional height stories from DCX 14, DCX 16, 18, and 20, with 20 being the max, as well as a height limit of 300 feet on the 20-story. All these floors, or stories, if you will, are based on 15-foot floors. So we're recommending to amend those, the DCX, add those zones, as well as adding a minimum height. So if you're to zone DCX 14 through DCX 20, the minimum height will be 4 stories minimum, just to be consistent with other zones. If you got any questions, this was provided by the applicant last month, just a rendering to show you what 20 stories would look like, what this would eventually look. And they have some examples of other buildings downtown. It's very similar. We have similar heights in the downtown core, as well as the Bend went 20 stories as well.
So 20 is allowed in the West End context area. This is adding it to the form-based code, adding those.
The only zone that allows you 20 stories right now would be the Bend.
I'm sorry, I said West
Bend,
Bend.
but one zone, one
right.
property. And then, of course, you can go C3, but that doesn't make sense to have C3 in the downtown area. So that's why we created Agree.
So this is really just a recognition that we need additional stories that people can then request rezoning in the form-based code. We're not debating any of those today. We're just adding the DCX 14, 16, 18, and 20.
Correct. And they're based on 15-foot floors.
Gotcha.
Get at the max footage number.
So we have an amendment to add additional stories to the DCX 20 in the downtown zone. A motion to approve has been seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Staff updates. Do we have any?
I don't have any unless Dan does.
I would just say, yes, thank you very much to our zoning staff and development services that are doing a lot of work right now. Zoning ordinance, these form-based code districts, other things. And it's the one today and the one next month are very important to the city. If you don't, one, CHA is basically an arm of the city government. And, I think we all want that area to be as successful as it can be. I actually agree with Matt about, the parking. I think parking is very subjective in how we determine it. We kind of always overbuild is our instinct. But the one next month is, again, a big and important site. And so, again, just a lot of thanks to everybody that's on this side that's been working on it.
Yeah, I like that. Cass and Emmy done they always do a good job. They did an exceptional job this month, the caseload and putting these things together.
Thank you. I'll restate it.
And he made,
Appreciate it.
and I made a comment last month, if y'all hadn't remembered, I said Cassidy was actually leaving us. You see, she's still here. She loved it so much, she decided to stay.
You talked her out of it?
We talked her out of it.
Talked her out.
We're glad she's staying. So,
Public comments on non-agenda items. Are there any? Yes, sir. And is this a 3-minute or not? It's a 3-minute? Okay. Yes, sir. Your name and address, please.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Philip Cox. I'm the general manager for WDF TV, 3300 South Broad Street. I'm here today representing our ownership. We're certainly not opposed to 2023-0157, which is the Chestnut Street property, but we have some concern. We were delighted when we first heard about this project.
Is this speaking on an agenda item? Yeah, and I probably should have asked for opposition or comment, and we did defer that case.
We were waiting for that. Yes, sir.
So I, sometimes when there's requesting for a deferral, so I may have to ask you, other than general comments, to maybe come back in 30 days.
Sure. We'll be happy to.
I apologize for that. Thank you.
No problem.
Appreciate
I
it.
would like to talk to RPA.
Yeah. I think Mr. Schultz can give you some information, and you can have some dialogue. That would be helpful, probably.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anything else on agenda items? I was going to make a comment on it. I can't make it on the case though either. So I did not see the minutes. Were the minutes in here? Did we get the
I believe
minutes?
they were. They're in my packet.
Okay.
Did you just take the minutes and throw them away?
I was going to wait until somebody went and copied them. So no, I'm kidding. I have a motion approval on the minutes. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Have a motion to adjourn. We are adjourned. Thank you.